They told you gratitude was just about saying thank you, about being polite, about pretending everything's okay. But if that were true, why do so many people still feel empty even after listing their blessings? Why do we still feel overwhelmed by pressure, drowning in noise, always chasing something more? The truth is, gratitude isn't about ignoring pain or forcing a smile. It's about seeing clearly, seeing deeply, seeing what's been there all along. And Buddhism holds the key, not to fake gratitude, but to a real, grounded thankfulness, the kind that changes how you see everything, the kind that makes your morning coffee taste sacred, your worst day feel softer, and your ordinary moments glow with meaning. Buddhist masters didn't learn gratitude from fortune cookies. They learned it from silence, from suffering, from watching leaves fall and realizing that nothing is owed and everything is a gift. They discovered that even pain can open your heart. Even emptiness can be beautiful. Even the breath you're taking right now can be a doorway to peace. Tonight, as you listen, your mind will begin to slow. The noise will start to fade. Your heart will remember what it feels like to be here, not reaching, not judging, just breathing, just noticing. And when you wake up, something will feel different. You won't just feel thankful. You'll feel alive. This isn't just another bedtime story. This is a new way of seeing, a reset for your soul, a return to the quiet truth you've always known. Are you ready to remember what really matters? Let's begin. And now, as the noise begins to fade and the stillness of the night starts to wrap itself around your thoughts, we're going to explore one of the most quietly powerful truths in all of Buddhism. It's not dramatic. It doesn't shout. But once it enters your heart, it shifts everything. If there's one lesson that can unlock true gratitude, not just for what's good, but for what is, it's this one. There's a kind of appreciation that only grows when you stop trying to hold on to life so tightly, when you stop fighting time, when you stop demanding permanence in a world that was never built to last. That kind of appreciation, that deep, soul-opening gratitude, doesn't come from getting what you want. It comes from understanding that nothing and no one will last forever. That's the strange gift of impermanence. The moment that truth begins to settle in, not as a thought, but as something felt in the bones, something changes. Suddenly, every second holds weight. Every hug becomes softer. Every meal tastes richer. Not because anything outside has changed, but because you have. Because when permanence is no longer expected, presence becomes everything. Buddhism doesn't treat impermanence like a tragedy. It treats it like a teacher, one that whispers truths we're usually too busy to hear. Like the way a child grows up right in front of you and you barely notice. Or how the sunlight on your face today will never shine in quite the same way again. Or how the people you love are here one day and memories the next. Most people walk through life trying to freeze it, trying to hold on to moments, control outcomes, keep things from changing. But the tighter the grip, the more painful the loss. Gratitude doesn't bloom in clenched fists. It grows in open hands. And when you start to open your hands, open your eyes, open your heart, you begin to see what was always there. Life's beauty, hiding in plain sight, waiting to be appreciated. There is no deeper gratitude than the kind born from awareness that this, all of this, is temporary. When you realize that the people you pass on the street, the feeling in your chest, the beat of your heart, the breath in your lungs, are all vanishing even as you notice them, it doesn't make you panic. It makes you pay attention. It's a strange kind of peace, the one that comes from knowing things will end. But it's real. It grounds you. It wakes you up. It says, don't miss this. Don't wait. Don't sleepwalk through the only life you get. And in that moment, gratitude stops being something you try to feel. It just happens. It becomes the natural response to the miracle of now. Buddhist monks practice walking meditations not to get anywhere, but to notice, to feel their feet on the ground, to hear the wind move through the trees. Because when every step is treated as if it might be the last, each one becomes sacred. When you stop taking time for granted, every second glows. This is not poetic fluff. It's a lived reality for those who train their minds to see, and it's available to anyone willing to pause. There's a story often shared in Zen Buddhism about a man being chased by a tiger. He runs and falls off a cliff, grabbing a vine mid-fall. As he hangs there, a second tiger waits below. And then he sees a wild strawberry growing beside him. He plucks it, eats it, and says, "Delicious." That's it. No escape, no miracle, just presence. Just the taste of the strawberry, one of the last things he may ever enjoy. That's impermanence. That's gratitude. That's freedom. Modern life trains people to delay appreciation, to say, I'll be grateful when I have more money, more success, more stability. But Buddhism flips it. It says, be grateful now, because now is all you'll ever have. It's not a punishment, it's a gift, a call to live with your eyes wide open, to cherish people while they're here, to love moments while they last, to say thank you even in the middle of chaos, not because everything is perfect, but because you noticed it before it disappeared. Even pain, when held gently, becomes something sacred. It reminds you of your humanness, of your aliveness, of the fragile, beautiful mess that is existence. And when you realize that even suffering will pass, even sorrow will dissolve, a quiet strength takes root. You don't have to fear change, you start to flow with it. And that flow, that surrender, is where gratitude begins to deepen. In the West, people are often taught to hold on. But in Buddhist practice, letting go is the way. Not letting go as in giving up, but as in trusting the natural rhythm of life. Seasons change, bodies age, relationships shift, grief comes and goes, joy does too. Everything moves. And in that movement, there's a wisdom that no book can teach, a truth that no guru can force upon you. You feel it when a loved one passes, when a child leaves home, when the music ends and you're left with silence. And in that silence, if you listen closely, there's something that grows. It's not loud, it's not flashy, but it's real. It's the gratitude that says, I didn't miss it. I lived it, I saw it, I loved it, and now I let it go. This lesson doesn't come easily. It requires courage to stop pretending things will last forever. It asks you to soften where you've hardened, to open where you've closed, to accept what you used to resist. But on the other side of that surrender is a kind of peace that doesn't depend on anything outside of you. It's the peace of being awake to this moment, just as it is, fleeting, and full of gifts. There's something strange that happens when you stop needing things to be permanent. You start loving them more. You stop rushing. You stop numbing. You start feeling. And that feeling, even when it includes sadness, becomes something you wouldn't trade for anything, because it means you're alive, fully alive, not just existing, but truly living. Think about the last time you cried because something ended, a relationship, a chapter, a day that meant something. That ache is gratitude's twin. It's not weakness. It's proof that you noticed, that you cared, that something mattered deeply enough to hurt when it passed. And that pain, that's not something to run from, that's something to thank, because it shows that you loved. Impermanence doesn't just make us grateful for the good, it makes us grateful for the chance to feel anything at all. For the way a cold wind cuts through the air in winter, for the way sunlight dances on water, for the way a voice cracks with emotion, for every reminder that this world is temporary and breathtaking. And the beautiful paradox is this: the more you accept that nothing lasts, the more you start to truly live. You say, "I love you," more often. You listen more carefully. You stop waiting for the perfect moment and start living in the real one. You say yes to life, not because it's safe, but because it's short, and every second matters. So tonight, as you fall asleep, let this truth settle deep into your being. Nothing you have will last forever. No feeling, no problem, no possession, no person. And that's not a reason to despair. That's the reason to open your eyes wider, to hold your teacup with two hands, to feel the weight of the blanket on your body, to hear the rhythm of your breath. Gratitude begins where expectation ends, where you stop demanding permanence and start honoring presence. This is the wisdom Buddhism whispers through the teachings of impermanence, that life is not something to possess, it's something to participate in, fully, lovingly, briefly. And in that brief flicker of time between birth and death, there is everything. Let that be enough. Now breathe deeply, let your body relax, let your mind soften. And now, as that quiet truth of impermanence settles into your bones, the kind of truth that softens your grip on everything you thought you needed, the next question rises almost naturally. What about the hard days? What about the pain, the uncertainty, the disappointments that seem to strip the color from life? Gratitude in moments of beauty is easy. But what about when life feels heavy? This is where the heart of Buddhism reveals one of its most radical teachings: gratitude not after the storm, but during it. It's easy to be grateful when everything is going well, when there's a breeze on your skin, food on your plate, laughter echoing down the hallway. But what happens when things fall apart? When the job is lost, the relationship ends, the diagnosis comes, or the silence in the room feels unbearable. Gratitude then seems out of place, even offensive. And yet, that is where it holds the most power. Buddhism doesn't ask you to pretend things are okay when they're not. It doesn't ask you to smile through suffering. It asks you to sit with it, to stay, to breathe through the ache and look closer, not to judge it or wish it away, but to discover what it's teaching. Because discomfort, as strange as it sounds, is not the enemy. In fact, it's often the doorway to something deeper. The Buddha himself didn't begin his path by escaping suffering. His journey started by confronting it. Seeing sickness, old age and death for the first time wasn't a curse. It was an awakening. The pain opened his eyes. And from that, an entirely new kind of wisdom was born. A wisdom that doesn't depend on constant joy to feel gratitude, but rather learns how to feel gratitude through the very act of being alive, in all its forms. Modern culture trains us to measure our happiness by how good we feel. But that's like judging a book by how shiny the cover is. Real life is not polished. It's messy, it's raw, and sometimes it's heavy. But in those moments, something sacred is also present, if we're willing to see it. Gratitude, when tethered to happiness alone, is fragile. It shatters the moment joy disappears. But gratitude that's grounded in awareness becomes unshakable. It doesn't depend on outcomes. It lives in presence. When life hurts, the question isn't, how do I escape this? The question becomes, what is this moment trying to teach me? And it's in that shift, from resistance to curiosity, that gratitude can enter quietly, like a soft light through a crack in the wall. You begin to see that struggle itself carries hidden gifts. That pain has the power to purify, to humble, to connect. That even confusion is a form of guidance pointing inward. There is no growth without discomfort. That's not a motivational slogan. It's a reality. Muscles tear before they grow stronger. Hearts break before they learn to open wider. Sometimes the thing that hurts you the most becomes the exact experience that teaches you what you needed to know all along. Gratitude in those moments isn't about celebrating the pain. It's about recognizing what the pain is waking up inside you. Buddhism teaches that suffering is not a mistake. It's part of the path. It's not a punishment for living wrong. It's the natural friction of life bumping up against our attachments, our expectations, our illusions. And when those illusions crack, what remains is truth. The truth of being human, the truth of needing others, the truth of not being in control. And somehow, even in the mess of it all, you begin to realize you are still breathing. You are still here. Gratitude in these moments isn't loud. It's not about declaring how grateful you are through gritted teeth. It's quiet. It shows up when you feel tears on your face and realize those tears mean your heart still works. It shows up when you're exhausted, but there's still a part of you that wants to keep going. It shows up when you've lost something important, but something else is rising in its place. Resilience, clarity, humility. There's a story from the Buddhist tradition about a woman named Kisa Gotami. After losing her child, she was devastated and went to the Buddha, begging him to bring her son back. He told her to find a mustard seed from any home that had not experienced death. She searched every house, but every door she knocked on told the same story, of loss, of grief, of sorrow. She returned with no seed, but with new eyes. Her suffering hadn't changed, but her relationship to it had. She had discovered she was not alone. And in that realization, a strange peace emerged. That's the kind of gratitude that suffering can unlock. Not joy in what's happened, but deep reverence for what it reveals. There's a strength that can only be born in the fire, a knowing that can only come from being cracked open. And when you've been through something hard and you come out softer, more aware, more compassionate, there's a thankfulness that arises, not for the pain itself, but for the truth it carved into you. People often think they have to wait until after the healing to feel grateful. But the truth is, gratitude can be the healing. It doesn't erase the pain, but it gives it meaning. It transforms it from senseless chaos into sacred transformation. It says, even this has value, even this can be used. Even this moment, though dark, is part of something whole. That's not easy. It takes practice. It takes presence. It takes the willingness to sit with discomfort without numbing, without running, without pretending. But the more you do it, the more you start to see the hidden layers within your struggles, the subtle ways life is still holding you, the quiet ways healing is already happening beneath the surface, and you start to thank not just the light, but the shadows too. It's easy to be grateful for the mountain top, but the valley teaches you to breathe differently, to walk slower, to notice things you never would have seen from up high. And one day, when you look back, you'll see that the darkest seasons often planted the seeds of your brightest moments, that the cracks in your story are where the most light came in. And you'll feel a gratitude that's no longer dependent on everything going your way. It's built on something deeper. It's built on understanding that discomfort is a teacher dressed in strange clothing, that it shows up uninvited, often at the worst possible times, and yet somehow leaves behind gifts you didn't know you needed. It teaches humility, patience, resilience, compassion. It strips away the surface and introduces you to what's underneath. And there, beneath the noise and the roles and the performance, is the raw, vulnerable, honest version of yourself, the one capable of gratitude even in the middle of the storm. When you stop trying to feel only happiness and start honoring whatever arises, you tap into the core of what Buddhist gratitude is really about. It's not a transaction. It's not feel good so I can give thanks. It's a way of relating to life that says, I am here, I am paying attention, I will learn from this. And when life is hard, you no longer feel like it's working against you. You realize it's working on you. And somehow, in that awareness, gratitude begins to grow, not in spite of the pain, but because of it. So if tonight you're lying in bed with heaviness in your heart, this is your invitation to shift the lens. Not to deny your pain, but to notice what else is here too. Is there breath? Is there stillness? Is there something you've learned, someone who stayed, something inside you that refused to give up? That is where the gratitude lives. Not just in the moments when everything is beautiful, but in the ones that bring you to your knees and still offer you the strength to stand again. That's gratitude beyond happiness. And that's the kind of gratitude that never leaves. When gratitude is no longer tied to happiness, when it grows even in discomfort, something starts to shift. The eyes begin to see differently, not just the big moments, but the quiet ones, the ones that barely make a sound, the ones most people miss because they're too busy looking for fireworks. But in Buddhism, it's often these subtle moments that hold the deepest wisdom, not the grand gestures, but the unnoticed kindness, the passing smile, the door held open, the tea someone makes without being asked. Tonight, we slow down enough to finally see them. There's a kind of blessing that never announces itself. It doesn't knock on the door. It doesn't post on social media. It walks gently through your day, leaving no trace except the warmth it leaves behind. These are the silent blessings, the unnoticed acts of kindness that stitch the fabric of life together in a way that no one ever teaches in school, yet everyone relies on. The person who lets you go first in line, the neighbor who waters your plants while you're away, the stranger who sees you're lost and offers directions without being asked. These things don't come with applause, but they carry a kind of sacred weight. Buddhism invites us to look deeper into these everyday exchanges. It teaches that the seeds of compassion and gratitude often bloom in the quietest soil. Most people are trained to recognize gratitude when something big happens, like getting a promotion or receiving a gift. But the mind that's awake to the present starts seeing blessings in between the headlines of life. The kindness that doesn't cost anything, but changes everything. Silent blessings are easy to miss because they don't interrupt you. They exist in the background, in places where attention rarely lands. But when the mind is trained in mindfulness, even the softest gestures become loud with meaning. The gentle nod from someone who recognizes your pain without needing to fix it. The friend who says, "I'm here," and means it. The way someone remembers your favorite drink and brings it without a word. These are not random acts. These are offerings. And when you begin to notice them, your life starts to feel rich in a way no possession could ever match. This awareness isn't automatic. It takes a certain slowing down, a willingness to be present, to see the way your life is supported in ways you never asked for and often didn't expect. You start to notice the person who answers your emails kindly even when you're stressed. The way someone cleans up after others without complaint. The fact that someone made the road you drive on smoother or the books you read clearer. All of it is connected, and all of it is worth noticing. Gratitude grows stronger the more it is practiced, and noticing silent blessings is one of the most powerful practices available, because it reshapes how you move through the world. Suddenly, the ordinary becomes sacred. The forgotten becomes important. The overlooked becomes treasured. You start to feel supported, not by some dramatic miracle, but by a million invisible kindnesses that surround you like air. In Buddhist psychology, this kind of awareness leads to mudita, appreciative joy. A joy that's not dependent on your own gain, but on witnessing good in the world. It's the feeling of seeing someone help another and feeling your own heart swell in response. It's the smile you give after watching someone pick up something another person dropped. It's the warmth that spreads when you see someone pause to comfort a crying child. This is not surface-level niceness. It's the recognition of our shared humanity, and it changes everything. Because when you begin to see silent blessings everywhere, your complaints begin to fade. You stop seeing the world as hostile. You stop assuming people are selfish. You begin to see the quiet effort others are constantly making. The way your life is touched by hands you've never met. The person who delivers your food in the rain. The one who answers the customer service call even though it's their 10th one that day. Gratitude expands when you realize how much of life runs on unseen kindness. Even the smallest interactions carry meaning. The way someone listens without interrupting. The way someone waits an extra second so you can cross the street. The way a teacher stays after class to explain something again. These are not chores. These are quiet gifts, and when received with a grateful heart, they transform both the giver and the receiver. Because when kindness is seen, it grows. When you thank the person who holds the elevator for you, you don't just complete a social script, you reinforce that the world is still good. This is one of the most radical forms of gratitude. It doesn't require the stars to align. It doesn't wait for everything to go right. It simply opens its eyes. And when you see life through this lens, even the mundane becomes magical. The hand that steadies your cup, the friend who replies with patience, the stranger who smiles without reason. It all becomes part of a quiet current of care that runs beneath the chaos of modern life. In Buddhism, this kind of attention is called sati, mindful presence. It allows the mind to rest in awareness without judgment. When sati is strong, gratitude becomes effortless, because you begin to feel how much you are held by the invisible web of human decency. Even when you're alone, you're not truly alone. Someone built your home, someone purified your water, someone farmed the rice that ends up in your bowl. Gratitude grows when you see these connections, when you feel the interdependence that supports your very breath. And this isn't about romanticizing the world. It's not about pretending all people are kind all the time. It's about choosing to notice what's often ignored, to focus your awareness on the threads of goodness that still exist despite the noise. Because the more you notice them, the more you begin to embody them. And soon, you're not just seeing silent blessings, you're becoming one. You start offering help without waiting to be asked. You start listening more and judging less. You hold the door not because it's polite, but because it's an extension of the awareness you now carry. Your kindness becomes quieter, deeper, freer from ego. You don't need to be thanked. You don't need recognition. Your presence itself becomes a kind of offering. That is the Buddhist way of service, not loud, not grand, but deeply intentional. And this is the surprising part. The more you give without needing to be seen, the more connected you feel. Because it's not the recognition that creates the bond, it's the intention. The silent wish that someone else suffers a little less because you were there. That is what gives life meaning. Not fame, not wealth, but the deep inner knowing that your existence lightened someone else's load. Gratitude for silent blessings is not just about noticing others, it's about noticing how you can contribute without fanfare, how your words, your gestures, your patience, your small choices all carry power. The way you greet someone, the way you forgive without holding it over their head, the way you answer a question with care even if you're tired. These things matter. These things ripple. And when you live with this kind of awareness, your life starts to feel less like a competition and more like a sacred collaboration. The deepest gratitude is not just felt, it's lived. It shows up in how you look at people, in how you pause before responding, in how you show up even when no one is watching. These are the practices that create inner peace, because when you recognize silent blessings, the world becomes less of a battlefield and more of a sanctuary, a place where the smallest gestures carry the loudest echoes. So tonight, as you rest your head, remember this. Most of the kindness you've received today will never be written down, never posted online, never spoken aloud. But it happened. It shaped you. It held you. And tomorrow, you have the chance to pass it on, not with big announcements, but with small, silent blessings of your own. And that, more than anything, is what keeps the world turning. After learning to see the silent blessings all around, the unnoticed kindness, the quiet gestures that make life feel softer, another shift begins to unfold, a deeper one. Because the next level of gratitude doesn't come from what is given to you or even from what you notice in others. It comes from the rare, radical act of learning to accept what is, not just the good parts, all of it, and not with resistance or regret, but with gratitude so deep it no longer needs things to be different in order to feel peace. This is where gratitude becomes a form of freedom, when it stops being a reaction to something going your way and starts being a way of relating to reality. Buddhist teachings don't ask you to love only the pleasant. They guide you to soften into the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. To stop fighting with what already exists. Because every time you say, "This shouldn't be happening," you disconnect from the present. And every time you say, "This is what's here, and I will meet it fully," you return to your power. Radical acceptance isn't about giving up. It's not passive. It's a courageous act of facing life without turning away. And when that kind of presence is met with gratitude, not forced, but chosen, something inside starts to unlock. The need to control loosens its grip. The habit of comparing, fixing, judging begins to dissolve, and you finally exhale. You no longer need life to match your plans to feel whole. You don't need every moment to be pleasant to feel grateful. Because you've realized that everything, every joy, every loss, every dull Tuesday afternoon is part of the same sacred fabric. Gratitude, in this sense, becomes a way of saying yes, not because everything is perfect, but because everything is real, and real is enough. Buddhist psychology teaches that suffering comes from resistance, from wanting life to be different than it is, from clinging to what's pleasant and pushing away what's painful. But when you drop that tug of war, when you stop arguing with the present moment, a deeper peace begins to surface, and from that peace, gratitude blooms, not because you got what you wanted, but because you finally stopped needing it. There is enormous strength in saying, "This is where I am, this is how I feel, this is what life is offering right now." That kind of honesty is the foundation of healing. And when it's paired with thankfulness, it becomes something even more powerful: liberation. Most people only feel grateful after things improve. But Buddhism teaches that gratitude is strongest when it's unconditional, when it whispers, "Thank you," even in the middle of confusion. Not for the pain, but for the clarity it can bring. Not for the hardship, but for the growth it allows. Gratitude at this level doesn't wait for the sun to come out. It stands in the rain and says, "This too belongs." Radical acceptance means no longer postponing your peace. It means not needing the next chapter to look a certain way in order to feel content now. It invites you to stop bargaining with the present moment and start embracing it. Even when it's imperfect, even when it's messy, especially then, because what if this version of life, the one you're living right now, isn't a mistake? What if it's not a detour from your path, but part of it? When gratitude starts asking questions like that, everything softens. You stop resenting your timeline. You stop chasing better versions of yourself. You stop treating now as something to get through, and you start being here, for real. This kind of gratitude doesn't ignore pain, it includes it. It doesn't pretend everything is okay. It says, even though this hurts, I trust it has meaning. That trust doesn't come easily. It's built moment by moment, choice by choice, but over time, it becomes the most stable thing you have. Not your circumstances, not other people, not your plans, but your own willingness to stay open. Think of all the energy that's spent trying to change what can't be changed, wishing the past were different, worrying the future won't go how you hope, judging your emotions as wrong, judging your body as flawed, judging your life as behind. Radical acceptance dissolves that entire cycle. It says, I will stop waiting for peace to arrive and start creating it from this exact moment. Gratitude becomes the tool that makes this possible. Because once you stop demanding life be different, you start to see what's already here. You begin to notice that your breath is still moving, that your heart is still beating, that the body you've spent years criticizing is carrying you through this experience, that the people in your life, even if they're imperfect, have shown up in their own way, and even when they haven't, you still made it. That's something to thank, not because everything worked out perfectly, but because you endured, you adapted, you continued. There's a Buddhist teaching that says, the path is not somewhere else, it's right under your feet. Gratitude for what is, not what might be, not what could have been, grounds you in that path. It returns you to the richness of this exact step, this inhale, this exhale, and that is the only place peace ever really lives. There's also a gentleness that comes with this kind of gratitude, the kind that releases you from the need to fix yourself all the time, the need to constantly upgrade, improve, optimize. Radical acceptance says, what if you're already enough? What if your worth isn't hidden in some future version of you? What if the fact that you woke up today is enough reason to be grateful? And what if the hardest parts of your life didn't break you, but revealed you? It's easy to be grateful when everything aligns. But that kind of gratitude is like sunlight. It disappears the moment clouds roll in. Radical gratitude is the moon. It shines even in the dark. It doesn't need perfect conditions to glow. It just needs your presence, your willingness to say, this is hard, but I'm still here, and that matters. Gratitude becomes radical when it refuses to abandon you in the storm, when it stays beside you in grief, when it whispers through tears, there is still something beautiful here. And sometimes that beauty is simple, the way a friend texts just to check in, the way your body carries you through a hard day, the way silence becomes soothing instead of scary. These aren't miracles, but they are everything. Acceptance doesn't mean liking everything. It means choosing to stop fighting with life. And gratitude helps you make that choice without bitterness. It allows you to look at your story, even the painful chapters, and say, this is mine. I lived it. I learned. I grew. And that softens the heart. It doesn't erase the past. It honors it, and it frees you to keep going with less weight. Sometimes the greatest peace comes not from changing your life, but from changing how you meet your life. Gratitude becomes the language of that shift. It turns survival into reverence. It transforms judgment into compassion. It reminds you that this moment, as flawed as it is, still holds value. And when you begin to live this way, not just during the good seasons, but in the everyday, unpredictable, messy reality of life, you begin to trust again. Not because you know what will happen next, but because you know you'll meet it fully, with a heart that's open and a mind that's grounded in truth. That is radical gratitude. That is radical peace. And tonight, as you rest deeper into this moment, may this thought echo quietly inside you. Nothing needs to change in order for you to feel free. Because when you stop resisting life, you start receiving it, just as it is, just as you are. And that is more than enough. When you no longer need things to change in order to feel peace, and when you begin to say yes to life exactly as it is, something else starts to unfold. A deeper noticing, a subtler kind of beauty. The mind begins to settle. The noise becomes softer. And in that stillness, another kind of gratitude starts to reveal itself, not for what's happening next, but for what's happening now, not the future you hope for or the past you miss, but the quiet richness woven into every ordinary moment you used to overlook. This is where gratitude deepens into presence, and this presence becomes the gift. There's a kind of joy that doesn't come from achievements or approval or dramatic events. It comes from the five senses, from being fully where you are, feeling the texture of the air as it touches your skin, hearing the soft hum of life moving around you, noticing the warmth of a blanket, the way your breath moves in and out, the subtle flavor of water on your tongue. These are the invisible gifts of the present moment, tiny details so easy to miss, yet so powerful when finally seen. Buddhism teaches that the present moment is not a stepping stone, it is the destination. And yet, most people spend their lives racing past it, searching for something more. But more doesn't exist in the future. More is found in what's already here, hidden beneath the surface of what looks like nothing. When you begin to notice your senses, truly notice, you realize how much life is already offering. Not through noise, but through stillness. Not through quantity, but through depth. This doesn't require a retreat in the mountains or silence in a monastery. It just takes one breath, one bite of food tasted fully, one step walked slowly. Gratitude grows when you allow the world to touch you again, not as a concept, but as a real, living thing. The body becomes a doorway, the breath becomes a teacher, and everything starts to feel alive. When the eyes stop scanning for what's missing and start seeing what's present, everything shifts. The color of the sky becomes brighter. The feel of water on your hands while washing the dishes becomes a soft meditation. The scent of the air after rain becomes a quiet miracle. You don't have to do more, you just have to be more aware. And from that awareness, gratitude flows like water from a spring you never knew was there. This kind of gratitude doesn't rise in the mind, it rises in the body. It speaks through sensation, through the gentle pulse in your fingertips, through the rhythm of your footsteps, through the way your shoulders soften when you hear a kind voice. It doesn't need words, it only needs attention. The more you pay attention, the more you feel the gift of now, not because it's extraordinary, but because it's real. Mindfulness in Buddhism is not just about watching your thoughts, it's about feeling your life, entering into it fully, knowing the temperature of the moment, listening deeply, seeing clearly, tasting slowly, being aware of the small things that often slip through your fingers in the rush to get somewhere else. This is not a rejection of goals or ambition. It's a return to what fuels them, because without presence, no achievement satisfies. Without presence, life becomes a blur. Gratitude grows when you stop needing big reasons to feel it. When the sunlight on your face is enough. When the sound of your breath reminds you that you're still here. When the quiet ticking of a clock becomes the rhythm of time passing through your open awareness. None of these things change the world, but they change how you live in it. They pull you out of the fog of distraction and back into the realness of being alive. And that aliveness is the true gift. In the modern world, attention is constantly pulled outward. Screens flash, notifications buzz, thoughts spin. But the practice of presence invites you to come back to this moment, this chair, this breath, this sound. And when you do, you find that what's already here is more than enough. Not because it's perfect, but because it's awake. The more you train your awareness to rest in the present, the more sensitive you become to its offerings. You begin to feel the difference between eating and tasting, between hearing and listening, between touching and feeling. Life no longer passes unnoticed. You meet it with open eyes and open hands, and gratitude stops being something you practice. It becomes something you are. Each moment carries a frequency, a texture, a tone, but you only hear it when you slow down. The flicker of candlelight, the gentle hum of electricity, the steady sound of your breath flowing in and out without needing your permission. These aren't just background details. They are the music of now, and the more you hear it, the more it begins to heal what was once restless. Buddhist teachers often guide students to return to the breath, not to control it, but to feel it, to let it anchor the attention back to this very moment. The inhale as it cools the nostrils, the exhale as it warms. It's not dramatic, but it's real, and it becomes a reminder you're alive. That alone is worthy of thanks. There's a softness that develops from this practice, a sense of returning to yourself, not the self that's achieving or performing, but the one that is simply here, being, sensing, noticing, the one that feels the ground beneath your feet and says, "This is enough." That kind of gratitude doesn't come from effort. It comes from presence, from the willingness to stop for long enough to receive what's already being given. And sometimes the most beautiful gifts are the ones no one else can see. The moment you touch something warm after being cold. The peace that fills your chest after a deep breath. The way a single word from a friend lands in your body and melts your defenses. These things can't be posted or measured, but they're real, and they change you from the inside out. This is why the Buddha taught that awareness is the path, because awareness makes everything available. When you're truly here, life meets you fully, and gratitude becomes the natural response, not because the moment is rare, but because you are present enough to notice it. This is not about slowing down your life. It's about deepening your attention, about learning to see the moment you're in as sacred, not someday, but now. The gift is not waiting in the future. The gift is breathing through your nose right now. It's the weight of the blanket on your legs. It's the sound of your heart beating in your chest like a drum that's been playing since the day you were born. The present moment never asks for anything. It only offers, over and over again. And when you begin to see what it's giving, without noise, without flash, without needing to prove anything, you stop craving more. You stop chasing what's already here, and you start receiving with full awareness, with an open heart. So tonight, let this be your only task, not to plan or analyze or fix anything, just to feel, to notice, to receive the invisible gifts of now, the ones that are waiting in the silence, in the softness, in the space between thoughts. They're not loud, they're not urgent, but they are always, always there. And when you begin to feel them, you won't need anything else to be different. You'll just be here, and here will finally feel like home. When the present moment finally becomes enough, when the sound of your breath, the warmth of your skin, the softness in the quiet is seen not as background noise, but as life itself, something even deeper begins to rise, a deeper tenderness, a deeper truth. Because what often brings us closest to presence is not what we gain, but what we lose. And while gratitude in comfort feels sweet, the kind found in loss has a gravity that can't be described. It must be felt. It opens you, it humbles you, and strangely, it has the power to awaken the most profound thankfulness you've ever known. Loss is not a concept. It is an experience that moves through the body. It's the silence after a voice goes missing, the stillness where laughter once lived, the ache where familiarity once gave you something to hold. Whether it's the death of someone you love, the end of a relationship, the fading of a dream, or the slow vanishing of your former self, loss never knocks politely. It enters without warning and rewrites the shape of your world. Buddhism doesn't deny loss. It doesn't sugarcoat it or dress it up. It meets it directly. The teachings begin with the first noble truth. Life involves suffering, not to depress or discourage, but to speak honestly about what it means to be human. And within that honesty is the seed of awakening, because when we stop pretending we're immune to loss, we stop being surprised by it. And when we stop being surprised, we start paying closer attention to what's still here. Gratitude through loss doesn't come from denying pain. It comes from fully feeling it, from letting the sadness say what it needs to say, from holding the grief gently, like a guest who didn't plan to stay but needs to be seen. In Buddhism, there's no pressure to move quickly through sorrow. In fact, there's deep respect for the way grief unfolds, slowly, quietly, honestly, and as it unfolds, it often reveals something underneath: clarity. Clarity that shows what mattered, who mattered, what remains, and what was never truly lost to begin with. When something is taken away, the mind naturally rushes to fill the space. But Buddhism invites you to pause, to sit with the empty chair, the unanswered phone, the quiet moments where a familiar presence is no longer found. Because in that pause, something unexpected begins to rise. Not just sadness, but reverence. Reverence for what once was. Reverence for how deeply you felt. Reverence for the fact that you loved enough to feel this kind of loss. There's a Zen proverb that says, "Let go or be dragged." But letting go in Buddhism doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean erasing the past or pretending something didn't matter. It means loosening your grip on what can no longer be held and gently placing your hands over what remains. Because something always does. A memory, a lesson, a kindness you now extend more freely. Gratitude doesn't require you to be over your loss. It simply invites you to look again, to notice the new shape life has taken. Sometimes the people who leave this world leave something behind that can never be taken. The way they made you laugh, the way they made you feel seen, the way they shaped your perspective. Gratitude grows when you stop focusing only on what's gone and start honoring what remains. And not just in your memory, but in your behavior, in your presence, in how you show up now. In Buddhism, there's the concept of continuation, that nothing truly ends. Everything becomes something else. The leaf that falls becomes part of the soil that feeds the tree. The tears that fall become part of the healing that helps someone else. Even your sorrow, when seen with gentle eyes, becomes a kind of offering, a reminder to others that love always leaves a trace. Gratitude through loss is not flashy. It's quiet. It's the moment you notice the sky and feel your loved one in the light. It's the smell of something familiar that pulls a name from your heart. It's the silence that used to hurt, but now brings peace. It's the day you laugh again, not because the pain is gone, but because it's no longer the only thing you feel. Loss teaches you to pay attention differently. You no longer assume anything will last. You no longer expect time to wait. And because of that, every moment becomes more vivid. Every conversation becomes more sacred. You stop holding back. You say the words. You listen with both ears. You cherish the now, not out of fear, but out of deep, living gratitude for what is still possible. There's a Buddhist practice known as Maranasati, or death awareness meditation. Practitioners reflect daily on the fact that life is fragile, not to become morbid, but to become awake, to stop postponing love, to stop delaying presence, to stop assuming there will always be more time. This awareness doesn't create despair. It creates urgency to live fully. It deepens the gratitude for the breath you still have. In the heart of grief, the teachings say, feel everything. Do not rush. Do not numb. Do not perform strength. Instead, let the sadness become part of your path. Let it soften your edges. Let it open you to others who are hurting. And as it does, you begin to notice things you couldn't before. The way someone stays silent with you in a room and somehow says everything. The way a gentle breeze can feel like a hand on your back. The way a single flower blooming can carry more meaning than an entire bouquet ever did. You begin to see that not all presence requires a body, that love does not need to be held to be felt, that even in absence there is connection. And in that connection, gratitude returns, quietly, powerfully, not in spite of your loss, but because of how much it taught you to see. When something breaks, what's left is often more honest, less decorated, but more real. That's what loss does. It strips away illusion. It reveals truth. And truth, when embraced fully, always leads to gratitude. Not because everything is okay, but because everything is real. The people you've lost, the places you'll never return to, the seasons that passed too quickly, they aren't gone. They live in your choices. They live in your awareness. They live in your ability to look at someone else's pain and say, I understand. That understanding is a form of gratitude. It says, this hurt me deeply, and yet I'm still open. And if you're still open, even with a broken heart, then you've already begun to transform loss into something sacred. Buddhist monks chant not only for blessings, but for those who have passed. Not because they believe the dead need words, but because the living need reminders. That love does not end. That memory is a form of connection. That grief is not an interruption of life, it is a thread woven through it. And when held with care, it becomes a source of wisdom, of gentleness, of grace. Gratitude through loss is not about pretending. It's not about silver linings or forcing meaning. It's about honoring the depth of what you felt, the truth of what was shared, the reality of what was lost. And then, from that place of deep honesty, looking around and noticing, there is still breath, there is still time, there is still something to give. You can still love. You can still hold. You can still remember. You can still say thank you, not because you moved on, but because something inside you moved deeper. So tonight, if there is someone or something you miss, let that missing become sacred. Let the ache be a prayer. Let the love you once gave become the love you give now in a different form to someone else who needs it. Because loss may change the shape of what's possible, but it never takes away your ability to be present, to feel, to offer, to grow. And in that presence is the softest, strongest form of gratitude there is. Loss has a way of sharpening your awareness. It takes what you once took for granted and makes it sacred. It teaches you how to hold moments fully because they won't come again in quite the same way. That kind of gratitude comes from being cracked open. But once the heart is opened that wide, the next challenge is keeping it open in a world that pulls your attention in every direction. Because what steals gratitude more quietly than grief is distraction. Not pain, but noise. Not heartbreak, but constant interruption. And nowhere is that more present than in the digital world. In Buddhist practice, mindfulness is about presence, fully experiencing one thing at a time. But in modern life, most people live in fragments. One eye on the screen, one hand on the phone, a dozen tabs open in the background of the mind. You're there, but not really. You're scrolling, but not seeing. Connected, but not nourished. And this disconnection from presence is also a disconnection from gratitude. Gratitude doesn't live in the future or the past. It lives in now. But the digital world is designed to pull you away from now. It feeds on urgency, novelty, comparison. It distracts you with updates, notifications, dopamine hits that feel satisfying for a second, but leave behind a deeper hunger. The kind of hunger that no screen can ever feed. You check the phone again, and again, and again. But what you're really looking for is peace, and peace can't be downloaded. Gratitude requires depth, and screens often keep you at the surface. You scroll past someone's pain, someone's joy, someone's story, and your mind never stops to feel it. You're exposed to everything, but connected to nothing. And slowly it becomes harder to appreciate the simple things, the warmth of your tea, the look in someone's eyes, the feel of a breeze. because your mind is trained to chase stimulation, not savor stillness. In Buddhism, the practice of retreat is not about escape. It's about return, returning to the self, to the breath, to what is real and unfiltered and alive. Digital detox isn't a trendy challenge. It's a spiritual discipline. It's an act of protecting your ability to see clearly, to feel deeply, to respond instead of react, and most of all, to remember what matters. The moment you disconnect from your devices, the mind starts to panic. It tells you something important might be missed, but that fear is often rooted in habit, not truth. What you actually begin to notice in those moments of silence is how much was already being missed. The conversation you weren't fully in, the food you didn't taste, the music you stopped hearing because you were trying to capture it instead of experiencing it. Gratitude begins to return when you slow down enough to receive again. The mind starts to breathe, the senses open, and suddenly something as ordinary as the sun on your skin feels extraordinary again. That's the power of attention, and technology, while useful, trains you to divide it. Gratitude grows when you reclaim it. Buddhist monks often live without personal phones, not because they reject modernity, but because they've chosen depth over distraction. They understand that attention is sacred, that where your awareness goes, your life goes, and if all your awareness is being siphoned into artificial urgency, then your real life, the one that can actually be touched, is happening without you. Technology is not the enemy, but unconscious use is. When you reach for your phone without knowing why, when you refresh a screen hoping for something that never satisfies, when you fall into a hole of other people's lives and forget to show up for your own, that's where gratitude disappears, not in big moments, in small, subtle leaks of presence. Gratitude doesn't need perfect conditions. It only needs your awareness, and awareness needs space. That's why digital detox is more than a productivity hack. It's a return to mental clarity. It allows you to reset your nervous system, to feel silence again, to watch your thoughts instead of being pulled by them. And in that clarity, you start to appreciate what doesn't change when the phone is off. Your breath remains, your body continues, the people around you still exist, the sky hasn't gone anywhere. These are the real constants, but you can only feel their gift when your attention is not being swallowed by a screen. That's why even small acts of digital restraint can open the door to something deeper. Turning off notifications, leaving the phone in another room, taking a walk without anything to capture, eating without multitasking. These acts seem small, but they carry a powerful message. I am here, and being here matters. Gratitude requires presence, and presence requires space. Without space, the heart gets crowded, and a crowded heart cannot feel deeply. That's why detoxing from digital noise is not just helpful, it's healing. It clears the static so you can hear again, not the news, not opinions, but the soft, steady voice of life moving through you. The part of you that remembers how to feel wonder, how to notice beauty, how to give thanks for something as simple as silence. There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being disconnected from yourself. And screens, when used mindlessly, amplify that disconnection. You're surrounded by people's highlight reels, but can't remember the last time you felt truly connected to your own joy. That kind of detachment leads to restlessness, to emptiness. But when you unplug, even briefly, you begin to feel your own rhythm again, your own heartbeat, your own thoughts, uninterrupted. And in that reconnection, gratitude finds a home again. Buddhist practice encourages direct experience, not filtered through cameras or curated through captions, just raw, honest being. What does this moment feel like? What is your breath doing right now? Can you feel your feet touching the earth? These questions don't lead to knowledge, they lead to presence, and presence leads to gratitude, not because everything is ideal, but because it's real. One of the most powerful things you can do for your inner peace is to reclaim your attention, to stop giving it away so easily, to realize that your ability to focus is not just a skill, it's your life force. And every moment you take back from distraction is a moment that can be filled with wonder, with awe, with thanks. So the next time you feel the urge to check something, pause. Ask, what am I really looking for? Often the answer is connection, meaning, validation. But the truth is, what you seek out there has always lived in here, in your breath, in your senses, in your stillness. And when you come back to that, you don't just find peace, you find a gratitude that doesn't rely on updates or likes or responses. It rises from a deeper place, from being fully, completely here. So tonight, as you begin to rest, allow yourself the luxury of disconnection, not from others, but from distraction. Let your breath become more interesting than the next scroll. Let the weight of your body on the bed feel more grounding than any headline. Let the silence between these words guide you home to the present. That's where your gratitude lives, and it's been waiting for you all along. After stepping away from the constant pull of screens and rediscovering the quiet power of attention, something begins to settle. The noise fades, the urgency loosens, and in its place grows a different kind of awareness, an awareness that doesn't want more, but starts asking a harder question. What if this is already enough? Because maybe the issue was never that life wasn't full, but that we were too distracted to notice its fullness. And in Buddhism, that noticing of what's already here, already working, already beautiful, is not just wise, it's liberation. Enough is not a place. It's a feeling, a state of inner clarity that doesn't depend on your bank balance, your achievements, or how much applause you receive. It is the silent realization that chasing more was never the path to peace, and that peace, ironically, was always waiting beneath everything you thought you needed. The Buddhist path doesn't condemn success or ambition, but it warns of craving, of the restless hunger that tricks you into believing happiness is always just one step away. Contentment is not laziness. It's not settling. It's the radical act of pausing and looking around and saying, right now, there is enough. It's the realization that more stuff, more titles, more control doesn't bring more freedom. It often brings more attachment, more stress, more confusion. And when the mind is clouded by that, gratitude suffocates. The Buddha called this craving tanha, a thirst that has no end. The more it is fed, the more it grows. You chase the next thing, then the next, and you tell yourself it's normal. But deep down, a quiet voice begins to whisper, This isn't it either. You reach the goal, and instead of peace, you feel emptiness wrapped in accomplishment. Buddhism doesn't ask you to stop wanting. It asks you to look closely at your wants and ask, where are they leading me? Gratitude grows when wanting fades. Not because you have nothing, but because you finally looked at what you do have. Your breath, steady and loyal. A mind capable of reflection and change. A heart still open despite what it's been through. A sunrise you didn't have to pay for. A friend who still listens. Enough is not measured in abundance. It is measured in awareness. There's a reason monks own so little. It's not about rejecting comfort. It's about not needing excess to feel alive. When the mind is trained to see enough in the smallest things, joy becomes easy to access. A simple bowl of food becomes a blessing. A quiet walk becomes a celebration. You begin to see that you are not poor in experience. You've just been overlooking the value of what's already in your hands. Modern culture thrives on dissatisfaction. You are constantly told to upgrade, enhance, hustle, improve. That message is relentless. Who you are is not enough. What you have is not enough. Where you are is not enough. And when that belief settles in your bones, even success feels hollow, even beauty feels dull. But Buddhism points to the opposite truth. Enoughness is not something to earn, it is something to remember. When you stop trying to outrun your life, you start living it. You taste your food instead of inhaling it. You look into someone's eyes and see their soul instead of their utility. You sit down without guilt. You wake up and feel the sheets against your skin and think, what a gift it is just to be here. That's not poetic. That's presence. And presence is what gives rise to the kind of gratitude that lasts. The mind conditioned by craving is always scanning for what's missing, but the mind trained in contentment is looking for what's here. And what's here, once you stop overlooking it, is a kind of quiet magic. You don't need to be the best to feel peace. You don't need to have the most to feel whole. You don't need to be constantly improving to feel worthy. Enoughness is not laziness, it is spiritual clarity. In Buddhism, there's a term santuti. It means contentment, satisfaction, the joy of enough. It is considered one of the greatest inner treasures, because when you feel enough, you stop needing the world to constantly validate you. You stop comparing. You stop rushing. And in that space, your true life begins to unfold. Not the life you were sold, but the life that was always here, waiting. You start to feel grateful for things others miss. The way the light hits the wall in the afternoon. The way your hands still function. The way a bird sounds when the world is quiet. These aren't grand experiences, but they're real. And when your heart is content, they become more than enough. They become sacred. Craving tells you happiness is in the next moment. Contentment says happiness is in this one. Craving says you're not quite there. Contentment says you already are. Gratitude born from contentment isn't loud. It doesn't need to be shouted. It shows up in the way you eat slowly, the way you respond with softness, the way you walk without rushing, the way you no longer feel the need to prove your worth. And yet, choosing enough is hard. Because it means stepping out of the race. It means disappointing the parts of your mind that want more applause, more status, more approval. It means accepting that this version of life, the one with its flaws and its mess and its imperfections, is not lacking anything essential. That takes courage. It takes presence, but it also brings peace. Monastics chant gratitude for simple things: a robe, a meal, a place to rest, not as a ritual of poverty, but as a practice of awakening. Because when you train your mind to see enough, you begin to see clearly. You see that joy doesn't come from stacking pleasures. It comes from noticing the ordinary and choosing to treat it as extraordinary. You no longer need the perfect meal to enjoy eating. You don't need the ideal relationship to feel love. You don't need a new life to be grateful for the one you already live. You begin to understand that enoughness is not a compromise. It is a form of deep spiritual maturity, a sign that you have stopped bargaining with the world and started honoring it. That's where gratitude becomes effortless, not a reaction to something going right, but a way of being with what is. When you feel the sun on your skin, when you hear someone laugh, when you sip water and feel it cool your throat, your heart says thank you. Not because you got more, but because for once you didn't need more. The practice of enough isn't about cutting things out. It's about cutting through illusion. It's seeing clearly that the next purchase, the next compliment, the next milestone will not bring what you thought it would. It may be enjoyable, but it won't complete you, because you were never incomplete to begin with. Gratitude helps you remember that. When you feel enough, you also begin to give more, not because you're overflowing with excess, but because you're no longer afraid of lack. You share more freely. You listen more patiently. You offer kindness without needing recognition. That's the secret. Contentment doesn't lead to stagnation. It leads to generosity. Because once you stop hoarding life, you start participating in it. You begin to see that your enoughness allows others to feel safe, that your grounded presence gives permission for others to stop performing, that your stillness has more power than your ambition ever did. That's the quiet revolution of gratitude born from enough. It doesn't shout or dominate. It simply radiates peace. And tonight, as your breath slows and your body sinks into rest, you don't have to reach for anything else. You don't have to fix anything before feeling grateful. You don't have to earn the right to relax. This moment is enough. This silence is enough. This life, with all its beauty and brokenness, is enough. And so are you. When the chase for more finally quiets down and the heart rests in the simplicity of enough, something rare begins to surface. A stillness that had been waiting underneath all along. Not boredom, not loneliness, but silence. And in that silence, a new kind of space opens up. Space that isn't asking to be filled, but simply noticed. Because there's a kind of gratitude that doesn't come from what surrounds you, but from what lives within. And Buddhism invites us into that space not as a punishment, but as a path. A path where solitude becomes sanctuary, and being alone becomes a blessing instead of a burden. In a world that constantly equates being alone with being unwanted, this might sound unfamiliar. But Buddhist teachings see solitude not as something to escape, but as something to befriend, not isolation, not exile, but the sacred company of your own presence. It's there, in the absence of noise and distraction, that the most overlooked kind of gratitude can finally begin to take root. The kind that doesn't depend on who's around or what's happening, but on the stillness that reveals what's always been inside. Solitude is not emptiness, it's space. Space to see your own thoughts without interference, space to feel your own breath without distraction, space to explore who you are when no one is watching. And in that honest space, something starts to shift. The discomfort begins to ease, the mind softens, and without the need to perform, a quiet truth begins to speak. You are already whole. Buddhist monks often spend long periods in silence, not as withdrawal from life, but as a deep engagement with it. They walk slowly. They eat mindfully. They sit with their own minds hour after hour, not to escape the world, but to understand it more clearly. They're not running from people. They're returning to the self beneath all the roles and labels. And that return brings clarity, not in grand revelations, but in subtle recognitions. Gratitude for being, for breathing, for awareness itself. Solitude teaches you to appreciate your own company. It reveals how much energy has been spent managing others' expectations, reactions, and opinions. It returns you to something simpler. The feeling of your feet on the ground, the warmth of the sun on your skin, the sound of your own laughter when no one else is in the room. These things are not small, they are deeply grounding. And when you notice them, gratitude doesn't have to be summoned, it arises on its own. Modern life treats solitude like a problem to fix. You're encouraged to fill the silence with noise, the stillness with scrolling, the space with stimulation. But when you constantly avoid being alone, you never get to know who you are without influence. You miss the chance to hear your own truth, and you miss the chance to discover that your own presence, when fully felt, is more than enough. The Buddha himself found awakening not in a crowd, but under a tree, alone. Not because he was running from the world, but because he was facing it honestly, without distraction. That's what solitude allows. An undistorted look at your thoughts, your heart, your habits. At first, that honesty can be uncomfortable, but over time, it becomes a source of strength. You stop needing noise to feel real. You stop needing others to feel valid. You start learning the difference between aloneness and loneliness. Gratitude in solitude is subtle. It's the soft thank you whispered when you wake up and realize no one needs anything from you. It's the deep exhale you take when you're not performing or proving. It's the strange, peaceful joy of hearing your own thoughts and not needing them to be different. It's a kind of internal spaciousness that doesn't depend on external validation. Buddhist teachers often say that the deepest companionship you'll ever know is with your own mind. If that relationship is neglected, no amount of socializing will soothe the underlying discomfort. But when it's cultivated, when you begin to treat yourself with the same warmth and curiosity you offer others, solitude stops being a punishment. It becomes nourishment. One of the greatest gifts of solitude is that it slows time. Without the constant pressure of conversation, performance, or schedules, you begin to notice the passing of moments more deeply. You hear the birds. You notice the wind. You start to remember things you didn't know you forgot. The world doesn't speed by. It unfolds slowly, gently. And in that slowing down, you become more present. And presence is what transforms ordinary experience into something worth thanking. There's a practice in Buddhist meditation called noble silence, a period where practitioners refrain from speaking, not just to others, but even internally. The mind becomes less busy, the heart more attuned. In that silence, many people begin to feel an unexpected gratitude, not for anything new, but for everything that was always there but never noticed. The weight of your own hand, the temperature of the air, the steady rhythm of breath. These are not signs of emptiness, they are evidence of life. And when life is seen with clarity, gratitude becomes the only honest response. Solitude also reveals the ways you've been running, not from the world, but from yourself. From unprocessed feelings, unresolved memories, unattended truths. But in solitude, those parts of you have room to breathe. They come forward not to overwhelm you, but to be acknowledged. And when they are, something softens, the walls drop, the pretending ends, and gratitude emerges, not for the pain, but for the permission to finally feel. Over time, solitude becomes less about being alone and more about being whole. You begin to see that the emptiness you feared was not a void, but a space waiting to be filled with awareness, gentleness, and care. You see that joy doesn't always require company. That insight doesn't need noise. That peace doesn't arrive through approval. It comes through presence. You also begin to see others differently. When you've spent time alone, you stop needing others to complete you. You meet them with more authenticity, more generosity, more freedom. You don't need them to fill your silence. You invite them into it. Your relationships improve, not because you say more, but because you listen better. And that listening started when you finally listened to yourself. Solitude teaches you to hold your own hand, to comfort your own heart, to cheer yourself on when no one is looking. And in that self-honoring, gratitude becomes a quiet companion. A thank you for the resilience that brought you here. A thank you for the stillness that holds you now. A thank you for the courage to be with yourself when it would have been easier to run. You begin to discover that some of the most healing moments in life don't happen in crowds. They happen in the early morning, when the world is still asleep and you're sitting in silence with your tea. They happen when you take a walk without your phone and realize the trees have been trying to talk to you. They happen when you cry alone, not because you're broken, but because you finally stopped holding everything in. That's the gratitude of solitude. It's not flashy. It's not something you can post about. But it's real, and it changes you. So tonight, if you find yourself alone, let it be sacred. Let the silence be a doorway. Let the space around you become a mirror. You are not missing anything. You are returning to breath, to presence, to the quiet strength that's been waiting for you all along. And that is more than enough to be grateful for. Solitude reveals the fullness of presence. It strips away the noise, the rush, the constant need to respond, and it teaches you to hear again, to feel again, to honor the quiet gifts of simply being alive. But there's one place where that presence can take on even deeper meaning, one daily ritual that is often rushed, often ignored, and yet holds the power to reconnect you to life itself. Eating. Because in every bite, there's a story, a history, a chain of life that has moved across fields, hands, air, and time to reach your plate. And when seen clearly, eating becomes more than nourishment. It becomes a prayer of gratitude. The act of eating is one of the most overlooked opportunities to practice mindfulness. In modern culture, it's often done with a screen in front of the eyes or a task list in the mind. It becomes automatic. Chew, swallow, move on. But in Buddhist thought, eating is sacred, not because of what is eaten, but because of how it's received. It's a chance to pause, to feel, to return to the body, and most of all, to recognize the interconnection that makes each meal possible. The first step in mindful eating is to stop, to actually look at the food in front of you and recognize that it didn't just appear. Someone grew it, someone harvested it, someone packed it, someone transported it, someone prepared it. Countless lives, seen and unseen, contributed to what is now resting in your hands. That awareness shifts the experience. The meal becomes more than a routine. It becomes a reminder of how deeply everything is connected. Buddhist monks begin their meals with reflection, not as a formality, but as a way of aligning the heart with gratitude. They ask, "Am I worthy of this food? Have I contributed today? Will I eat with mindfulness, not greed?" This reflection isn't about shame. It's about awareness. It invites the eater to slow down, to honor the food, and to meet it with presence rather than mindlessness. When you take your first bite with awareness, something changes. The flavor deepens. The texture becomes clearer. The experience becomes richer. And this richness isn't because the food changed. It's because you did. The gratitude grows not just for the taste, but for everything that had to happen for you to taste it at all. The soil, the sun, the rain, the labor, the moment. It all comes together in that bite. Gratitude through mindful eating isn't limited to gourmet meals. In fact, the simplest foods often reveal the most. A warm bowl of rice, a slice of bread, a piece of fruit. When eaten slowly, when felt fully, these become reminders that life is always offering nourishment, not just through flavor, but through connection. That every bite is a link in the web of existence. This is not about perfection. You don't have to turn every meal into a ceremony, but even one bite taken in silence, with presence, can shift something in you. It can bring you out of autopilot. It can soften your relationship to food. It can remind you that this act, this everyday, often forgotten act, is a form of receiving. And when you truly receive, gratitude arises naturally. Mindful eating also teaches moderation. When you eat slowly, you notice your body's cues more clearly. You stop when full. You savor more with less. The need to consume out of boredom, emotion, or habit begins to fade. You no longer eat just to fill space. You eat to honor the life that supports your own. That is one of the most powerful shifts in Buddhist practice, turning the act of consumption into an act of reverence. Gratitude grows when you feel supported. And what is food if not support? Not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, relationally. Food brings people together. It tells stories. It holds memories. But when rushed, all of that is lost. The taste fades. The meaning dissolves. And you're left full in the stomach, but empty in the heart. Mindfulness is what brings it back. Eating with presence also allows you to confront your patterns with compassion. You begin to see what you reach for when you're anxious, what you avoid when you feel shame, what you crave when you're lonely. And rather than judging these patterns, you learn from them. You slow them down. You meet them with kindness, because the goal is not control, it's understanding. Understanding is what allows transformation. And transformation opens the door to deeper gratitude. When you prepare your own food, mindfulness begins even earlier. Washing the vegetables becomes a meditation. Slicing with care becomes an act of love. Cooking slowly becomes a ritual of service. You begin to thank the food not just with words, but with your attention. You treat each step with gentleness, and that energy flows into what you create. The food becomes an offering, not just to yourself, but to everyone who eats with you. In Buddhist temples, meals are often shared in silence. There's no conversation, no entertainment, just the sound of spoons, chewing, and breath. At first, it can feel strange, but then something clicks. The silence becomes supportive. The senses heighten. The connection deepens. You realize that gratitude doesn't need to be spoken to be felt. It can move quietly, from mouth to heart to mind. You also begin to understand impermanence more intimately. The food that nourishes you now will be gone in minutes. The fullness you feel will fade. The moment will pass. But rather than mourning that, you appreciate it more. You taste while you can. You give thanks while it's there. And you let go without grasping. That's the beauty of mindful eating. It teaches you to live fully in each moment, even as it disappears. This awareness carries over into the rest of life. You begin to approach other routines with more reverence, washing your hands, pouring tea, feeding your child. You stop seeing these acts as tasks. You begin to see them as expressions of gratitude, and this shift creates peace, not because life became easier, but because it became more felt. Food, when eaten mindfully, becomes a mirror. It reflects your state. It reveals your habits. It shows your pace. But it also shows your potential to slow down, to receive, to notice, to thank. You don't have to wait for a holiday or a special dish. Every meal can become a place of return, a place to come home to your breath, to your body, to the blessings that are too often eaten in a rush. The practice doesn't require much, just presence. Just one breath before the first bite. Just one moment of stillness before reaching for more. That's all it takes. Gratitude doesn't grow in quantity. It grows in attention, and that attention, when given freely, turns even the simplest meal into something sacred. So, the next time you sit down to eat, pause. Feel the weight of the bowl, the warmth of the steam, the colors, the scent, the texture. And then take a slow bite. Taste fully. Swallow completely. Feel the nourishment reaching your body. And let your heart whisper the quiet truth. This is enough. This is a gift. And I am grateful. Because gratitude, at its core, is not about what you have. It's about how deeply you receive what's already been given. After rediscovering the sacredness in each bite of food, after learning to slow down long enough to honor the simple act of nourishment, something else becomes easier to feel. A deeper thread. A quiet realization that every meal, Every ingredient, every step in the ritual of eating involved countless lives, most of whom we'll never meet. That's where the practice of gratitude naturally begins to expand, not just for what is in front of you, but for everyone and everything behind it. Gratitude moves outward, and in Buddhism, this expansion leads to one of its most profound insights: interdependence. The understanding that no one lives in isolation and nothing is truly done alone. Gratitude becomes transformational when it's no longer limited to personal blessings, when it starts to touch the invisible hands that have made your life possible. The people whose names you'll never know. The strangers who grew your food, paved your roads, delivered your packages, built your home, kept the power on, cleaned the streets. These are not extras in the background of your story. They are the fabric of it. And Buddhism teaches that when this truth is deeply seen, the ego softens and the heart expands. Interdependence, or paticca samuppada in Buddhist terms, is the recognition that everything arises because of everything else. Nothing exists independently. A tree needs sunlight, soil, water, wind, time. A human being needs language, culture, shelter, care. Even your thoughts are shaped by experiences you didn't choose. You didn't invent the alphabet. You didn't create the internet. You didn't build the chair you're sitting on. You are being supported right now by thousands of forces, some seen, most unseen. This is not meant to overwhelm. It's meant to awaken a deeper kind of gratitude, one that bows silently to the people you may pass on the street without a second glance, one that respects the janitor as much as the doctor, one that sees the value of each link in the chain, knowing that when even one link is missing, everything changes. The mind conditioned by separation says, "I did this myself." The mind trained in interdependence says, "I walk on the efforts of others." And from that view, even the most routine things begin to glow with appreciation. That cup of tea, it took hundreds of people to make possible, from the farmer to the factory worker to the truck driver to the shopkeeper. Gratitude then becomes not just a feeling, it becomes a lens, a way of seeing the world with new eyes. When you start thanking strangers in your heart, something shifts in your energy. You stop seeing the world as full of enemies or competitors. You begin to feel held, supported, connected. That connection doesn't require conversation. It doesn't need to be returned. It just needs to be felt. And when it is, even traffic feels different. Even waiting in line becomes a reflection of human rhythm, not as an inconvenience, but as a shared experience. Buddhism emphasizes compassion not as a concept, but as a direct result of understanding interdependence. When you see clearly that your well-being is tied to others, it becomes natural to wish them well. Even if they'll never know, even if they'll never thank you back, because the point is not to be seen as good. The point is to recognize goodness as a shared responsibility. There is a practice in some Buddhist traditions where practitioners dedicate the merit of their meditation to all beings, not just friends or family, but all living things. This isn't symbolic. It's a direct act of gratitude, a way of saying, because I benefit from the labor and kindness of others, I give this moment of peace to the whole. That's how wide Buddhist gratitude is. It doesn't stop at the self. It keeps moving, rippling outward. This doesn't mean ignoring injustice. It doesn't mean pretending the world is always kind. It means holding both truths at once, the pain and the beauty, the failure and the effort. Gratitude in this context is not naive. It is clear-eyed. It sees how systems work. It sees who is often invisible, and instead of forgetting them, it includes them. It thanks them. Silently, yes, but sincerely. Interdependence also dissolves arrogance, the sense that one person deserves more than another, that your success is solely your own, that you are separate from the people who seem to have less. In Buddhism, this illusion of separation is called avidya, ignorance, and the practice of seeing connection is what dispels it. It's what allows the heart to open wider, not because you were told to, but because you finally see the truth. We rise and fall together. Gratitude for unseen connections also brings healing. It softens loneliness, because even when you are physically alone, you are not unsupported. Someone built the phone you use, someone stitched your blanket, someone raised the animal or grew the grain that feeds you. You are not disconnected. You are held in a vast web. And when you remember that, the ache of separation begins to ease. This awareness makes you walk differently through the world. You start to hold doors a little longer. You make eye contact with the cashier. You give a silent nod to the sanitation worker. You begin to say thank you, not always out loud, but in your presence, in your choices, in the way you carry yourself. Gratitude becomes embodied. And the beauty is, this kind of gratitude is available at all times. It doesn't depend on good moods or good weather. It only depends on seeing. Seeing the intricate, sacred chain of cause and effect that makes each moment possible. And when you see it, gratitude no longer feels like a practice. It feels like a response, a natural response to the truth of being alive in a world where everything, somehow, supports everything else. Even the people who challenge you are part of this. The ones who test your patience, who push your buttons, who bring out your shadows. They too shape your growth. They reveal what still needs healing. And if seen from a place of wisdom, even that difficulty can be met with a strange kind of thanks. Not for the pain, but for the chance to respond with clarity instead of reactivity. Gratitude for unseen connections is not sentimental. It is fierce. It is clear. It asks you to wake up from the illusion of separateness and feel the hum of life moving through everything. Through the hands that prepared your food, through the writers whose words shaped your thoughts, through the farmers, engineers, healers, dreamers who have poured themselves into the world so you could live more freely. It also brings a sense of responsibility, not the heavy kind, but the meaningful kind. If so many lives have supported yours, how can your life support others? Not through grand gestures, but through small, consistent care, through showing up with kindness, through offering your own labor, words, time, presence, energy. Gratitude then becomes not just internal, it becomes active. And when you start living this way, something remarkable happens. Life stops being about getting. It becomes about giving, not out of obligation, but out of recognition. You give because you've received. You offer because you've been supported. And that giving returns to you in the form of deeper peace, wider connection, and a quieter, more grounded joy. So tonight, as you rest, Think of the invisible hands that held you today. The ones who didn't know your name but made your day possible. Thank them in your heart. Let that gratitude stretch beyond your immediate circle. Let it touch the vast web of connection that holds all things together. Because when you see how deeply everything is linked, you stop walking through the world like a stranger, and you start walking like you belong. When the heart finally sees the web of unseen connections that hold up every part of life, it becomes almost impossible not to feel moved. Something softens, something shifts. You start noticing more, appreciating more, even those who may never know the role they played in your life. But with that clarity comes another truth. Sometimes the people who impacted us the most also caused the deepest wounds. And this is where gratitude meets its hardest test. Because some things are not easy to thank. Some moments are too sharp, too heavy, too painful to wrap in a smile. This is where Buddhism turns the heart inward and asks one of its most transformative questions. What if gratitude and forgiveness are not opposites, but allies? Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's not approval. It's not about saying what happened was okay. It's about choosing to stop carrying the weight. It's about looking at the hurt and saying, "You don't get to control me anymore." In Buddhist thought, forgiveness is an act of wisdom, not weakness. It is what releases the mind from the past and allows the present to feel whole again. And that freedom, once tasted, makes room for something unexpected: gratitude. At first, the connection between gratitude and forgiveness can feel confusing. Why would you ever feel thankful for someone who hurt you? Why should pain deserve anything other than silence or resentment? But this is where the teachings go deeper. Buddhism doesn't tell you to pretend something didn't happen. It asks you to sit with what happened long enough to understand it. And in that understanding, sometimes the pain becomes a teacher. Gratitude through forgiveness doesn't come all at once. It doesn't ask you to rush. It doesn't mean turning pain into joy. It means recognizing that the wound led you somewhere. It taught you boundaries. It forced you to grow. It revealed the strength you didn't know you had. It showed you where your healing still lives. And when seen through that lens, even the most difficult relationships begin to shift. Not because the story changes, but because your relationship to the story does. In Buddhism, the mind is seen as something that can be trained, just like the body. And holding on to resentment is like holding a flame, expecting the other person to burn. The one who holds the anger is the one who suffers. Forgiveness is the act of putting the flame down, not for the benefit of the other, but for your own peace. And in the quiet that follows, space opens up. And in that space, gratitude can begin again. Forgiveness is not a single act. It is a practice, a returning, a slow, sometimes painful unwinding of the story you've carried. And every time you let go, even just a little, you make room for something lighter, something that isn't built from defense or pain. Gratitude then becomes a natural response to that freedom. Not gratitude for the pain itself, but for the strength that came from surviving it, for the clarity that came from the fall, for the way you got up again. Buddhist psychology speaks often of dukkha, suffering or dissatisfaction, as a natural part of life. Everyone carries it. Everyone has been hurt. Everyone has hurt others. This shared human truth is what makes compassion possible, and it's also what makes forgiveness necessary. Because if we are all flawed, if we are all learning, then withholding forgiveness becomes a way of holding ourselves back too. The walls we build to keep others out also keep our own gratitude from flowing freely. Gratitude is a form of presence, and resentment ties us to the past. When you forgive, you free yourself to return to now. You stop rehearsing the story. You stop trying to win the argument in your head. You stop needing to be right, and in the silence that follows, you start noticing things again. The way the sun hits the table, the way your body still breathes, the way someone smiled at you today. All of that was there before. You just couldn't feel it through the fog of holding on. Forgiveness also allows you to reclaim parts of yourself that were frozen in time. The version of you that was silenced, the part that became guarded, the softness that once trusted. These are not things to discard. They are parts of you waiting to be welcomed back. And gratitude grows when you stop needing to be at war with yourself. When you stop dividing the timeline of your life into good and bad, right and wrong, strength and shame. You begin to see it all as part of the same journey. Buddhism teaches that even our enemies are our teachers, not because they were right, but because they reveal what we still cling to. They show us where our attachments live, attachments to being understood, to being treated fairly, to being seen in a certain way. When those attachments are challenged, pain arises, but so does insight. And with insight comes choice. The choice to continue the cycle or to step out of it. Forgiveness is how you step out. Gratitude is what meets you when you do. There's a chant often used in loving-kindness meditation. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from suffering. That includes you. That includes the ones who hurt you. That includes the parts of you still healing. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. It means refusing to let pain become your identity. And gratitude helps that refusal feel rooted, not just in principle, but in truth. Sometimes forgiveness begins not with others, but with yourself. The mistakes you made, the things you didn't say, the times you betrayed your own values. These are the heaviest stories of all. And yet, Buddhism teaches that clinging to self-blame is just another form of attachment. You are not the worst thing you've ever done. You are not frozen in your failures. And the moment you begin to forgive yourself is the moment you start to thank yourself for surviving, for trying again, for not giving up. That self-thankfulness is a powerful step. It's what turns guilt into responsibility. It's what turns shame into transformation. It's what makes the past a source of wisdom instead of a weight. You don't need to forget what happened. You don't need to love every version of yourself. You just need to stop using old pain as proof that you're unworthy of peace. Gratitude through forgiveness isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It shows up in how gently you start talking to yourself, in how you stop seeking revenge in your thoughts, in how you stop rehearsing comebacks and start reclaiming your energy. It's the shift from "they owe me" to "I release them," not because they deserve it, but because you deserve freedom. You begin to realize that letting go doesn't erase justice. It just stops the bleeding. It creates space for new life to grow. And in that new life, gratitude returns, not as a performance, but as a way of breathing. You begin to say thank you for the chance to feel again. Thank you for the resilience that held you through it. Thank you for the people who stayed. Thank you for becoming the kind of person who can move forward without needing to hold on to hate. So tonight, if something in you still feels heavy, this may be the moment to begin again, to take one breath and release one thought. You don't have to fix everything. You don't have to forgive everything. You just have to be willing to soften, to stop turning your back on peace, because when you do, gratitude comes rushing in, not for what happened, but for what you can now become. And that is enough, more than enough. Always. Letting go is never easy, but forgiveness creates a rare kind of silence, the kind that feels like fresh air after a long storm. And in that space, something soft begins to rise, something that doesn't need explanation or permission, something that's always been there, steady and quiet, even when everything else fell apart. Your breath, the constant that never left, the companion you didn't realize was guiding you all along. In Buddhist practice, this is where gratitude begins to settle, not just in the heart, but in the body, through breath, through presence, through the simple act of being alive, one inhale at a time. Breath is the one thing that connects every moment of your life. It's the first thing you did when you arrived in this world, and it will be the last thing you do before you leave it. It asks for nothing, yet gives everything. And most of the time, it goes unnoticed. But in Buddhist meditation, the breath is not a background process. It is the anchor, the doorway to clarity, the teacher that reminds you that life is not in the past or the future. It's here, it's now, and it's breathing. Gratitude for breath doesn't need to be loud or poetic. It begins when you stop long enough to feel it, to really notice the way air enters your body and leaves it, how it expands the belly, softens the chest, grounds the feet. You begin to feel the breath as something more than function. It becomes a relationship, a rhythm, a prayer of presence that requires no words. This is not about controlling the breath or manipulating it. It's about witnessing it, letting it be exactly as it is, shallow or deep, fast or slow, heavy or light. The breath is not here to impress. It's here to carry you through whatever comes. And when you learn to meet it with awareness, gratitude arises, not from what you gain, but from what you finally notice. The ancient Buddhist texts often refer to breath as the bridge between body and mind. It's always available. It can't be taken from you by circumstance or noise, and yet, because it's so constant, it's often ignored. That's the irony. What sustains you the most is what you forget the fastest. But when you return to it, when you really feel it, your entire world slows down. The past becomes less sharp, the future less urgent. And what's left is presence, not forced, not fake, but real, tangible, alive. This kind of breathing is not something extra to add to your day. It's already happening. The only difference is that now you're paying attention, and that attention changes everything. It changes how you listen, how you walk, how you speak, how you rest. Because when breath becomes your companion, you stop living in reaction. You start living in rhythm. The Buddha taught anapanasati, or mindfulness of breathing as a core practice, not because it was trendy or dramatic, but because it was universal. Everyone breathes, everyone suffers, everyone forgets, and breath is the tool that brings you back, over and over again. It doesn't matter what your past looks like. It doesn't matter what you believe. The breath welcomes everyone equally. And when you see that, gratitude isn't something you have to create. It becomes your natural state. There's a subtle shift that happens when you become more aware of your breathing. You start to sense its intelligence, the way it changes when you're tense, the way it deepens when you rest, the way it shortens when fear arises, and the way it anchors you when you choose to return. The breath becomes a mirror. It reflects your state. It shows you where you're holding, and then it offers you a way to soften again and again. Gratitude grows when you feel supported, and nothing supports you more consistently than your breath. It never asks for your attention, but the moment you give it, it meets you fully. That's the beginning of trust, not in ideas or people or outcomes, but in the moment itself. In your ability to be here, to feel, to respond with presence instead of panic. Breath awareness also teaches patience, because when you're watching the breath, you're not pushing or chasing, you're simply being. And that being is where healing happens. Not in trying to fix everything, but in learning to sit with it, to breathe with it. And in that stillness, you begin to feel grateful not just for the calm, but for the capacity to remain during the storm. When the mind is racing, when the heart is heavy, when everything feels too much, your breath becomes the doorway back. You don't have to solve everything. You don't have to escape. You just return to one inhale, one exhale, and then another. Slowly, the grip of fear loosens, the fog begins to lift, and in its place is something softer, something steadier, the quiet joy of still being here. There's a kind of reverence that comes from meeting your breath this way, not as a tool, but as a friend. You start to see how it carries your emotions, how it responds to joy, to pain, to fatigue. It becomes a language your body speaks when words fall short. And the more fluently you listen, the more connected you feel, not just to yourself, but to everything around you. This awareness also deepens compassion. You begin to realize that everyone breathes. Every person you pass, every person you judge, every person who's ever hurt you or helped you, they're breathing too, struggling, hoping, trying, failing, beginning again. That shared breath becomes a thread that links all beings. And from that thread, empathy grows, not from effort, but from recognition. Breathing with gratitude also helps you appreciate the moments that used to feel empty. Waiting at a red light, standing in line, lying awake at night. These become opportunities to return, to reconnect, to feel yourself alive without needing to do or fix or prove anything. Just breathing, just being. And in that simplicity, peace begins to grow. Over time, this practice reshapes how you experience life. You start to respond instead of react. You pause more. You listen better. You speak with more care. And when difficulty comes, as it always does, you're not thrown as far off center. You return to breath, to now, to what is true beneath the noise. And the gratitude that arises isn't fleeting. It's not dependent on mood or outcome. It's steady, rooted, Because it's not based on getting what you want, it's based on being who you are, a breathing, feeling, living being who can meet life one moment at a time. That's the heart of the practice. That's the gift. So, tonight, let this be your only goal. Not to change anything, not to solve anything, just to breathe, and to notice that you are breathing, to let that breath be enough. Let it guide you back. Let it soften your thinking. Let it loosen the grip of the day. Because every breath you take is a quiet reminder. You are still here. You are still part of this life. And that, in itself, is something to be deeply grateful for. Breath is the truth that never leaves. It holds the body, quiets the mind, and pulls awareness gently back into the now. And once it's truly seen, not just as a function, but as a gift, something deep and unshakable begins to grow. A new kind of respect for life, a steady sense of thankfulness for what has always been freely given. But there's something else that often stands in the way of that thankfulness, a silent barrier that grows quietly in the background of modern life. Entitlement, the belief, spoken or not, that more is owed, that comfort should be guaranteed, that life is failing if it doesn't unfold according to preference. In Buddhist thought, this is not just a mindset, it's a form of suffering, and the antidote isn't more success or validation, it's gratitude. Entitlement whispers that the world should serve the individual, that the discomfort of waiting, the inconvenience of limits, the absence of ease is something unjust. It turns blessings into expectations. It transforms support into assumed standards. And once that shift occurs, appreciation dries up. Not because the world has stopped giving, but because the mind has stopped recognizing it. Buddhism doesn't condemn entitlement with anger, it meets it with clarity. It reveals how this grasping, this expectation, this silent demand for life to be tailored around personal wants is a cause of constant frustration, and it shows how gratitude is not just a solution, it's freedom. Modern life trains the mind to expect fast service, constant affirmation, endless choices. It offers convenience that becomes invisible and then expected. But what begins as progress quietly morphs into assumption. You forget that clean water is a miracle, that electricity is an invisible kindness, that the ability to read, to walk, to speak, to choose, none of these were guaranteed. When those things stop being seen, life begins to feel insufficient. And the truth is, it's not life that changed, it's perception. Gratitude reverses that perception. It asks the mind to slow down, to look again, to stop treating what is available as what is owed, because nothing is truly owed, not breath, not shelter, not kindness. And yet, these things exist. They meet us, sustain us, support us through even the hardest days. When you stop to feel that, entitlement begins to dissolve. It can't survive in the same space as sincere appreciation. In Buddhism, the practice of mindfulness naturally weakens entitlement. Because the more present you are, the more obvious the gifts of this moment become. The breeze that touches your skin, the light that falls across the room, the body that still functions, even after everything it's endured. You stop asking why things aren't better. You start feeling stunned that they work at all, that anything works, that, despite all your flaws and struggles, this moment is still happening, and it's enough. Entitlement is a mind obsessed with comparison. It constantly measures what others have and what's missing. Gratitude, on the other hand, is rooted in direct experience. It doesn't care what someone else owns. It feels full because it finally notices what's already here. And when the mind moves from comparison to connection, suffering starts to fade. One of the core teachings of Buddhism is that clinging causes pain. Entitlement is a subtle form of clinging to imagined futures, to specific outcomes, to the belief that life must look a certain way to be good. But when that clinging is released, when the heart bows to reality as it is, a different energy arises. Not defeat, not resignation, but deep reverence. Reverence for this body, this breath, this day, this chance to begin again. Entitlement also disconnects people from one another. It assumes others exist to meet your needs, that their labor, time and effort should align with your convenience. But gratitude reconnects. It sees effort. It honors contribution. It acknowledges that someone, somewhere, is helping hold your world together. The delivery driver, the factory worker, the translator, the coder, the teacher. Gratitude dissolves hierarchy. It replaces demand with humility. In monastic life, Buddhist monks rely entirely on the generosity of others. They do not buy or prepare their own meals. They walk silently with their bowls, receiving what is offered, not as a right, but as a gift. This practice is not about poverty. It is about perspective. It is about learning to receive with thankfulness and to let go of the illusion of control. Every meal becomes a lesson in humility. Every bite a reminder that nothing is guaranteed and everything is connected. That kind of living may feel far away from modern life, but its spirit is close. It asks, what would happen if every task, every interaction, every meal was seen not as an obligation, but as a chance to give and receive with awareness? How much of daily life could become sacred again, not through ritual, but through attention? Gratitude, when lived deeply, becomes a kind of prayer, not to a god, but to existence itself. Entitlement limits the heart. It narrows the range of what's acceptable, what's satisfying. Gratitude expands it. It softens edges. It allows joy to enter through unexpected doors. A cold drink on a hot day, a moment of silence, a kind glance from a stranger. None of these require perfection. They only require noticing. And when noticing becomes a habit, the world begins to bloom. There's also a psychological cost to entitlement. It creates anxiety, the constant fear that you're not getting what you deserve, the endless scanning for signs of unfairness, of being overlooked. But gratitude relaxes that fear. It doesn't deny injustice. It just doesn't let it define everything. It allows you to feel full, even in the middle of imperfection. That fullness is what leads to inner peace. Reversing entitlement isn't about guilt. It's about awareness. It's about seeing that the line between enough and not enough is created by the mind, and that when you change how you see, you change how you live. Buddhism doesn't ask you to shame yourself for wanting more. It simply asks you to look closely, to ask, is this want rooted in joy or in fear? Is this expectation making me kinder or more bitter? And most of all, is it blocking me from seeing what's already here? Gratitude also invites participation. Entitlement waits to be served. Gratitude asks, how can I serve? It moves from I deserve to I appreciate, from I need more to I can give more. And that shift changes relationships, work, rest, and even how you view your own life. Because when you stop needing life to owe you something, you begin to offer your life back to others. This doesn't mean becoming passive. Gratitude doesn't cancel ambition. It just purifies it. You can strive without needing to conquer. You can grow without needing to compare. You can seek improvement without being at war with what is. That's the beauty of Buddhist gratitude. It includes action, but removes aggression. Over time, living without entitlement brings a kind of joy that's impossible to fake. A quiet contentment that doesn't rely on praise, progress, or proof. It's a joy that lives in the details, in the sound of your own breath, in the feel of water on your hands, in the fact that you woke up today, again, with a chance to begin. That's not small, that's everything. And it's available now, not after you achieve more, not after you get what you want. Now, this moment, this breath, this body, this life. So, as you rest tonight, reflect gently. Is there anything you've been expecting without noticing? Any quiet blessings you've started treating like background noise? Let your mind bow, not in shame, but in awakening. Let it return to what's already here. And from that return, let gratitude rise, not as an emotion, but as a way of seeing, a way of walking, a way of living that says over and over again, this is not owed, and yet it is given. And that is more than enough. When the weight of expectation begins to fall away and gratitude takes its place, life starts to feel less like a transaction and more like a gift. The heart becomes lighter, the mind less demanding. But even with this newfound appreciation, there's still another voice that often lingers in the background. A voice that speaks in worry, that replays what-ifs, that trembles in the face of uncertainty. Anxiety. It wraps itself around the unknown, grips tightly onto control, and feeds on the illusion that danger is always near. But within the teachings of Buddhism, there's a quiet but powerful counterforce. Not resistance, not suppression, gratitude. Anxiety thrives in the future. It grows in the space between now and the next possible outcome. It paints scenarios, spins stories, and convinces the mind that safety can only come from predicting everything. But gratitude lives elsewhere. It lives in this breath, in this moment. It calls attention back from the imagined threat and places it gently in what is real, what is immediate, what is undeniably happening right now. And when the mind starts to settle in the present, anxiety begins to lose its grip. Buddhist practice doesn't deny fear, it doesn't shame it or try to erase it. It acknowledges that worry is part of being human, but it also teaches that not every thought deserves belief, that not every fear needs to become a prison. Gratitude becomes the tool that reminds the nervous system that not everything is going wrong. That even in difficulty, there are things that are stable, things that are working, things that are worthy of thanks. When fear rises, it narrows attention. It zooms in on the worst-case scenario. It pushes the body into tension, shortens the breath, floods the mind with what-ifs. But when gratitude enters, it opens attention again. It expands the frame. It gently shifts focus to what is supporting you, even in this moment of unease. The chair beneath you, the breath moving steadily, the body that, though anxious, is still carrying you. You begin to notice that anxiety is only one part of the experience. It is not the whole truth. Gratitude acts like an anchor, not because it denies the storm, but because it keeps you from being swept away by it. In Buddhist meditation, when fear arises, the instruction is not to fight it, but to stay with it, breathe with it, and notice what else is here. That's where gratitude lives, in the small spaces around fear, in the details you've forgotten while your thoughts raced toward disaster, the feeling of your feet on the floor, the sound of a bird outside, the fact that you are still breathing, still thinking, still able to make choices. Gratitude doesn't require the fear to vanish. It just invites you to widen your view. The more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. The mind, trained by modern life to expect constant danger, begins to rewire itself. It stops scanning for what might go wrong and starts recognizing what is already going right. This is not toxic positivity. This is awareness. Honest awareness of the full picture. Fear may still be there, but now so is the sunrise. So is the softness of your blanket. So is the silence that helps you think more clearly. These are not distractions. They are part of reality too, and gratitude helps you hold all of it. One of the core insights in Buddhist psychology is that clinging to control creates suffering. And anxiety, at its core, is the mind clinging tightly to the illusion that control is the only way to feel safe. Gratitude loosens that grip. It says, "I don't know what will happen, but I see what's already been given." It shifts the nervous system from fight or flight to rest and receive. It lets the body remember what peace feels like, not because everything is perfect, but because not everything is falling apart. Gratitude also changes the way you speak to yourself. Anxiety often comes with harshness, with blame, with the inner voice that says, "You should have known, you're not ready, something bad is coming." But when gratitude enters that inner space, the tone shifts. It becomes more gentle, more honest. It says, "Yes, this is hard, and look how far you've come." It says, "You don't know what's next, and still, you're here." Gratitude replaces the inner critic with the inner witness, one that sees without judgment, one that softens fear with truth. Even physiologically, gratitude changes the chemistry of anxiety. Studies have shown that practicing gratitude lowers cortisol, slows heart rate, and increases the brain's ability to focus and regulate emotion. In Buddhism, these changes aren't just side effects. They're signs that the mind is returning to balance, to the middle way, to a state where the nervous system no longer needs to prepare for imaginary danger, but can finally rest in what's real. Anxiety isolates. It tells you that you're alone, that no one understands, that the world is hostile and indifferent. But gratitude reminds you that connection is always possible, that people have helped you before, that kindness has touched your life in small and big ways, that the world, while uncertain, is also full of care. The moment you start to list even 3 things you're grateful for, your awareness shifts from isolation to inclusion. And inclusion is the antidote to fear. Gratitude also grounds the body. When the mind is anxious, it floats into the future. But when you begin to thank your body, your lungs for breathing, your hands for working, your feet for walking, you pull yourself back into form. You stop being a floating thought. You become a person again, a grounded, breathing, sensing being who can meet this moment with clarity. In Buddhist loving-kindness practice, fear is often met with phrases of care. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be at peace. These phrases are not wishes, they are reminders. Reminders that fear doesn't make you unworthy of calm, that anxiety doesn't erase your right to feel steady, and that even when the storm is loud, gratitude can be the still point inside it. You begin to see that gratitude is not something to reach for when life feels good. It is something to turn toward, especially when life feels uncertain. It becomes the tool that helps you pause before panic, that helps you question the story that says it's all falling apart. That helps you come back to this moment, not with denial, but with courage. Gratitude also brings perspective. It reminds you that you've faced difficulty before, that you've survived hard days, that worry didn't break you, that somehow, even when fear said you wouldn't make it, you did. And here you are, breathing, listening, growing. That history is real, that resilience is real, and remembering it is a form of gratitude in itself. Eventually, this practice becomes part of your nervous system. The mind still worries, but now it also remembers. It remembers that peace is possible, that fear can visit without staying, that the breath is always available, that gratitude doesn't erase anxiety, but it makes room beside it. A room where calm can sit down, where kindness can return, where you can rest, even if just for a few moments. So, as this night unfolds, let that room be enough. Let one grateful thought soften one anxious one. Let one moment of presence interrupt the loop of fear. You don't need to be fearless. You just need to remember that not everything is a threat, that some things are still beautiful, that your body is still breathing, that this, right now, is not danger, it's life. And life, even when uncertain, is still full of things to thank. Let that be your protection. Let that be your peace. Let that be the beginning of a new way forward, one breath at a time. When gratitude begins to calm the storms of anxiety, when the breath slows and the heart softens, something unexpected starts to open, space for others, for their voices, their stories, their presence. Because fear tends to narrow the mind, but thankfulness expands it. And in that expansion, another kind of gift reveals itself. The gift of mindful listening. In Buddhism, listening is not just a way to gather information. It's a form of meditation, a form of service, a form of connection, and it's in that quiet, intentional hearing that gratitude finds a deeper home. Most people aren't truly heard. In conversations, they're often met with interruption, judgment, distraction, or silence that's waiting to speak again. But when someone listens with their full presence, something shifts. Defenses lower, trust builds, the speaker softens, the listener awakens, and between them, a kind of invisible gratitude begins to grow, not because anything was solved, but because one soul finally met another without noise in the way. Mindful listening means being fully where you are. No planning your response, no forming conclusions, no multitasking in your mind. Just hearing, noticing tone, body language, the pauses between words, feeling the emotional current, not just the content. It's not passive, it's active presence. It says, right now, your words matter. Right now, I'm not trying to fix you, change you, or out-talk you. I'm simply here. In Buddhist teachings, this kind of listening is considered one of the deepest forms of compassion, because to truly hear someone without inserting your own agenda is to offer them a place to exist as they are. And when people are allowed to be as they are, gratitude naturally arises, not just in them, but in you, because you begin to realize how rare and powerful that kind of presence really is. Gratitude in listening is not always loud. It can be felt in the warmth of a nod, in the silence that holds space, in the softening of someone's face when they realize they won't be interrupted. It's in the trust that builds word by word, and it grows strongest not when there's agreement, but when there's genuine attention. Listening this way changes relationships. It heals what distance has frayed. It reveals layers of someone that were buried beneath quick conversations and surface talk. It uncovers histories, longings, and fears that were never meant to be secrets, but simply needed patience to be shared. And the listener, through that patience, receives something more valuable than any clever reply. They receive truth, vulnerable, living truth. Gratitude deepens in that truth, because when you listen deeply, you begin to see the effort it takes for someone to speak their truth, the courage it takes to show up, the trust it takes to be open. And suddenly, you're not just hearing words, you're witnessing a gift, a moment that could have passed unnoticed, but instead becomes sacred. Buddhism teaches that every person is a mirror, and when you listen without judgment, what you hear in them often reflects what lives in you. Their fears touch your own. Their joys remind you of forgotten happiness. Their confusion echoes your own searching. And in that shared humanity, a new kind of gratitude arises, not just for them, but for the reminder that you are not alone. This kind of listening also requires humility. To hear someone without inserting your story, to not one-up, correct, or compare, to let them lead the moment, to let them feel seen without your ego needing attention. That humility is not silence, it's strength. The kind of strength that says, this moment isn't about me. And that kind of surrender creates room for connection deeper than words. Mindful listening can also reveal how rarely we truly show up. How often we listen to respond, not to understand. How often we filter what we hear through our own judgments. But awareness brings change. And with that awareness comes the chance to shift, to listen better, to care more honestly, to sit with someone's words the way you would sit beside a friend in silence, not needing to fix the silence, just to share it. Buddhist practice often emphasizes deep listening, not just with others, but with yourself. Hearing the quiet truths beneath your own thoughts. Not silencing them, but listening with curiosity. That same quality of inner listening is what gets extended outward. The more kindly you listen to your own struggles, the more space you create to hear others without defense. Gratitude in listening also transforms conflict. Because when someone feels heard, they no longer need to shout. When they feel understood, even if not agreed with, the edge begins to dull. Tension drops. And what remains is a human being who, like you, wants to be known, not judged. Gratitude in these moments isn't about being right. It's about recognizing the courage it takes to speak and the compassion it takes to hear. This doesn't mean agreeing with everything. It means honoring someone's experience as real, even if it's different from your own. It means letting the conversation become a place of connection, not conquest. And that act, again and again, reshapes not just the conversation, but the relationship. Over time, this becomes less a technique and more a way of being. You walk into conversations not to defend, but to discover, not to teach, but to understand. And as you listen more mindfully, the world begins to open. Strangers become more human. Loved ones feel safer, and gratitude grows, not for what was said, but for the space that was created. This practice also trains the mind to slow down, to not rush toward the next thing, to linger in the now. And that slowness is healing, because it reminds both people that presence is still possible, that depth still exists, that connection isn't lost, it's just hidden beneath hurry and habit. But once you slow down enough to hear it, it returns. Gratitude in mindful listening becomes a kind of nourishment. For the speaker, it's the nourishment of being received. For the listener, it's the nourishment of being useful without fixing. And for the relationship, it's the nourishment of trust quietly growing, not from big gestures, but from consistent presence. So tonight, let this reflection settle in your heart. Think of one person you spoke with recently. Ask yourself, did I hear them fully? Did I let them finish? Did I hold their story like it mattered? Not to guilt yourself, but to remind yourself of the power you hold. The power to create safety, healing, and appreciation just by listening differently. Because in the end, deep listening is an act of love. And love, when met with awareness, always leads to gratitude. Let that be your practice. Let that be your presence. Let that be the reason someone, someday, breathes a little easier just because you were willing to hear. When the mind slows enough to truly hear another, when attention becomes a form of love and presence replaces interruption, something rare is restored. Trust, connection, a feeling of being part of something deeper than the self. But even within that depth, another tension often remains quietly in the background, a pressure that says, do more, be more, fix more. The voice that tells you rest is laziness, stillness is unproductive, and that peace must be earned through endless motion. This is where gratitude meets one of its most surprising teachers, the art of non-striving. Non-striving doesn't mean giving up. It means giving yourself back. Back from the constant pull of becoming someone else, from the constant effort to improve, to outdo, to keep chasing some future version of fulfillment. In Buddhist practice, non-striving is not laziness. It is clarity. It is the realization that true peace does not come from force. It comes from letting go of the need to force anything at all. Gratitude, when rooted in non-striving, no longer waits for conditions to be perfect. It begins to see that this moment, just as it is, holds enough. That the self, just as it is not broken or behind. It is breathing. It is alive. It is worthy of appreciation, not because of what it might become, but because of what it already is. And when this truth is seen clearly, the constant striving begins to lose its grip. Modern culture thrives on the idea that more effort equals more worth. But Buddhism teaches something radical, that inner peace does not grow from struggle, it grows from awareness, from noticing what is already here, from stopping the chase long enough to see that many of the things you've been reaching for are already in your hands, and that realization shifts something deep. It replaces the stress of not yet with the stillness of already. This does not mean passivity. It means presence. It means choosing not to exhaust your spirit in the pursuit of what can only be felt when you slow down. Non-striving is not refusing to grow. It's refusing to grind your soul down in the name of proving your worth. It's a return to enoughness, a soft thank you to yourself for all the ways you've tried, and an even softer whisper that says, you don't have to try so hard to be here. In meditation, non-striving is a foundational attitude. The breath is not forced. The thoughts are not silenced by will. The body is not pushed to conform. Everything is allowed to be as it is. And in that permission, something else begins to emerge. Gratitude. Not because something was achieved, but because nothing needed to be. You begin to see that peace was never the prize at the end of striving. It was the space that opened when you stopped striving. Gratitude in non-striving feels different. It's quieter, more grounded. It's not the excitement of accomplishment, it's the relief of release. It's the softening of the shoulders, the exhale that says, I can rest now. It's the deep recognition that being alive is already enough reason to say thank you. That being able to sit still, to breathe, to exist without demand is not a failure of productivity. It is the essence of being human. Non-striving also invites trust. Trust that life is unfolding in ways you don't have to micromanage. That growth happens in the pauses. That healing doesn't always require effort. It sometimes just requires space. Gratitude flourishes in that trust. It no longer hinges on control. It no longer waits for achievement. It becomes the natural response to the freedom of being allowed to be as you are. In a world that celebrates hustle, non-striving is a rebellion of the gentlest kind. It says, I will not sacrifice my inner peace for someone else's idea of success. It says, I will not make my worth dependent on how much I do. It says, I will listen to the rhythm of my own breath, my own body, my own heart. And in that listening, thankfulness returns, not as a practice, but as a homecoming. Even the simplest actions feel different when done without striving. Walking becomes a gift. Eating becomes a meditation. Speaking becomes intentional. You stop rushing through life and start meeting it, moment by moment, without the pressure to win, without the fear of falling behind. You begin to see that nothing needs to be added to this moment for it to be worthy of your full attention. Buddhism teaches that striving often comes from aversion to what is, and that aversion creates suffering. Non-striving, then, is a form of compassion, a way of saying, this is difficult, but I do not need to run from it. A way of meeting pain without resistance, of meeting joy without grasping, of meeting the present without needing to improve it. Gratitude grows in that space, because once the need to change everything fades, the beauty of what already exists comes into view. Letting go of striving also reveals how much of life's beauty is subtle. The smile you almost missed, the moment of silence before a response, the feeling of your feet on the floor after a long day. These are not achievements, they are experiences. And when you stop measuring your life in progress, you start noticing your life in presence. Gratitude then becomes not a reaction to big moments, but a way of being with small ones. Non-striving also teaches you to relate to yourself differently. You stop demanding constant improvement. You stop evaluating every emotion. You stop fixing yourself like a broken machine. Instead, you begin to treat yourself like a friend. You begin to appreciate your own rhythms. You begin to rest without guilt. And in that rest, your nervous system begins to heal. Your inner voice becomes kinder. Your heart becomes more open, not because you earned it, but because you allowed it. This permission changes everything. It changes how you approach your goals. You still care, you still move forward, but now you're not chasing. You're participating, you're not pushing, you're engaging. And because your worth is no longer tied to the outcome, you can actually enjoy the process. That joy is a form of gratitude, one that grows without effort, because it's no longer afraid. Buddhist teachers often speak of the middle way, a path between indulgence and denial, between apathy and over-effort. Non-striving lives on that path. It holds both care and ease. It says you can move forward without force. You can desire growth without demanding perfection. You can live with intention without sacrificing your peace. Over time, this way of living begins to reshape your inner world. The noise quiets, the urgency fades, and in its place, a steady gratitude begins to grow, not for what might come, but for what is already here, the breath, the moment, the simple truth that, even without doing more, you are still worthy of peace. So tonight, let yourself rest in that truth. Let your body unwind. Let your thoughts pass like clouds. You don't have to figure it all out. You don't have to achieve anything. You are allowed to simply be. And in that being, let gratitude find you. Not as a goal, but as a reflection of the freedom that only comes when you stop trying to be anywhere but here. When the pressure to constantly improve finally dissolves, when the mind no longer clings to some distant ideal and begins to settle into the quiet richness of what already is, something soft and strong begins to bloom. You start to notice more. You breathe easier. You listen more deeply. You walk through life with less resistance. But just as peace starts to root itself in your daily rhythm, life brings its greatest teachers, not through calm, but through challenge. And often, those challenges wear the faces of people who test your patience, push your boundaries, or seem impossible to understand. This is where Buddhist gratitude is tested in its most powerful form, through the presence of difficult people. It's easy to feel thankful when things are harmonious, when conversations are gentle and people meet you with kindness. But true transformation happens when you can look at someone who irritates, frustrates, or confuses you and find within yourself not just tolerance, but genuine appreciation for what they're teaching you. This doesn't mean accepting abuse or allowing harm. It means understanding that every person who disturbs your peace reveals something about the peace that still depends on conditions. Buddhism teaches that people are not problems to solve. They are mirrors. Every reaction, every discomfort, every emotional spike is a signal pointing inward. Difficult people often shine light on the places in you that are still reactive, still unhealed, still holding tight. And while the instinct may be to shut them out, push them away, or label them, the deeper practice is to turn toward the discomfort, not to agree with it, but to understand it. Gratitude begins when you realize that these people are helping you see yourself more clearly. This is not a romantic idea, it's hard work. Some personalities simply don't click. Some interactions leave bruises, some conversations feel like battles. But Buddhist wisdom offers a different approach, not to fight the experience or avoid it, but to inquire into it, to ask, what is this person showing me about myself? What expectations am I bringing into this moment? What part of me is still attached to being right, to being liked, to being in control? Gratitude starts to grow, not because the person becomes easier, but because your mind becomes less reactive. You stop needing them to change for you to be at peace. You start seeing the space between their behavior and your response. And in that space, choice is born. The choice to listen more than defend. The choice to pause instead of escalate. The choice to soften, even if they don't. This shift isn't weakness, it's freedom. When your peace no longer depends on others behaving the way you want, you reclaim enormous power. And that's when you begin to feel thankful, not for the conflict, but for the clarity. You thank the person not for hurting you, but for showing you where your work still lives. You thank them not because they were right, but because they revealed something real. And that kind of gratitude is unshakable. In Buddhist practice, this is the heart of compassion. Not just wishing others well, but recognizing their suffering even as they hurt you. Most difficult people are not malicious, they are hurting, reacting from fear, pain, confusion. When you can see that, something softens in you, the edge dulls, the armor loosens. Gratitude then becomes a form of compassion, a quiet acknowledgement that we are all trying, failing, learning, and that no one is only the worst thing they've done. Even if the interaction doesn't change, you do. You carry less resentment, you ruminate less, you stop replaying arguments in your mind. That inner peace is not a gift the other person gave you, it's a gift you gave yourself by changing your perspective. And that self-given peace becomes something you deeply value. Gratitude arises for your own capacity to grow, to stay present, to choose kindness even in the face of discomfort. Difficult people also teach you boundaries. They help you see where you've been too open, too accommodating, too afraid to say no. They force you to clarify what matters to you, and that clarity, once gained, becomes a strength. Gratitude then includes the lesson, the firmness, the self-respect that was born from the tension. Without the difficulty, those muscles wouldn't have developed. There's also a humility that comes from being around those you don't naturally like. It shows you the limits of your patience. It exposes your judgments. It humbles your assumptions. And from that humility, a deeper gratitude arises, not just for the lesson, but for the opportunity to choose love in a place where it doesn't come easy. That choice makes your compassion real, not theoretical. Over time, you may even begin to feel thankful that not everyone agrees with you, that there are voices in your life that challenge your thinking, that force you to reflect more deeply, speak more clearly, feel more intentionally. These people become sharpening stones, not because they are kind, but because they make you pay attention. Gratitude here is not a reaction, it's a decision to grow instead of shut down. There's a story in Buddhist tradition of a disciple who asked the Buddha how to practice compassion towards someone who is truly cruel. The Buddha replied, "Find the place in you that fears them and offer compassion there first." This is where gratitude lives, in that soft place beneath the fear, the frustration, the hurt. When you offer compassion there, gratitude follows, not because the person became easier, but because you became freer. Sometimes the most difficult people are the ones closest to you. Family, co-workers, longtime friends. These relationships hold history, expectations, emotional weight. But Buddhist wisdom invites you to approach even these bonds with mindfulness, to ask, what can I learn here? What have I been unwilling to see? What version of them am I still clinging to instead of meeting them as they are today? Gratitude in these cases often begins with grief, grieving the relationship you wanted, the version of the person you hoped they would become. But once that grief is honored, space opens for something else, for acceptance, for clarity, for a gentler kind of love, one that no longer depends on change, but rests in recognition. You start to thank them, not because everything was good, but because they helped you become who you are. They brought your wounds to the surface so they could be healed. They tested your patience until it became real. They pushed your buttons until you finally understood the wiring. That's a strange kind of gift, but a powerful one. And when you see it, gratitude becomes deeper than any apology. You also learn to thank yourself for not giving up, for staying soft, for not becoming bitter, for doing the hard work of healing even when no one else was. That self-gratitude is essential. It's what keeps you grounded, what reminds you that you don't need everyone's approval to be at peace. And slowly, you begin to see difficult people not as curses, but as hidden allies, unwanted guides who force you to grow in ways comfort never could. They sculpt your inner life with sharp tools. They bring out your strength by resisting it, and in that friction, you find something enduring, something honest, something that says, "This isn't easy, but I'm grateful to have learned what I've learned." So, as the night deepens and your mind begins to rest, let one name come to heart. Someone who's tested you, challenged you, maybe even hurt you. Let your breath wrap gently around their memory. You don't have to forget. You don't have to agree. But if you're ready, offer just one quiet thank you. For the strength you found, for the clarity you gained, for the self you returned to because of them, not because they deserved it, but because you do. After learning how to meet difficult people with clarity and compassion, something else begins to surface. Someone even more persistent, even more challenging, even more present than anyone on the outside. That voice in your mind that never seems satisfied. The one that comments when you wake up, whispers while you try to rest, and criticizes even your smallest attempts to do something good. The inner critic. It knows your fears. It remembers your mistakes. It predicts your failure. And yet, within Buddhist wisdom, even this voice is not treated as the enemy. It is listened to, met with awareness, and, eventually, thanked. Not for the harm it's caused, but for what it was trying to do. Because, underneath its harshness, is something rarely acknowledged, a desire to protect. Most people try to silence the inner critic by fighting back. They argue with it, numb it, drown it out with distractions. But resistance only feeds its power. What Buddhist practice teaches is that this voice isn't just noise. It's a wounded protector. A voice formed out of fear, shaped by past pain, conditioned to prevent future harm. It speaks in judgment, not because it's cruel, but because, somewhere along the way, it believed that criticism could keep you safe. Gratitude toward the inner critic doesn't mean agreeing with it. It means understanding it. It means stepping back from the content of its message and seeing the intention behind it. When the voice says, "That wasn't good enough," it's often trying to keep you from rejection. When it says, "You're not ready," it may be trying to shield you from embarrassment. Its strategy is flawed, but its motive isn't always malicious. And when you meet it with this kind of clarity, something begins to shift. You stop seeing it as an enemy. You start seeing it as a scared voice that never learned how to speak gently. This shift doesn't happen overnight. The critic's voice is old. It's often rooted in childhood. It may echo the tone of parents, teachers, or peers who demanded perfection or gave love conditionally. Over time, you internalize those messages, believing that being hard on yourself would earn safety, love, or success. But in Buddhist insight, the goal is not to erase the past. It's to understand it, because understanding brings compassion. And compassion, when turned inward, opens the door to healing. Begin by noticing the voice. When it speaks, pause. Don't push it away. Don't take it as truth. Just listen. Hear what it's saying. Feel the energy behind it. Then ask, what is this voice trying to protect me from? What fear is it trying to manage? And what would I say to it if I knew it wasn't trying to hurt me, but to help? This is where gratitude begins, not for the pain it's caused, but for the protection it tried to offer. You start to appreciate the role it played in keeping you alert, driven, cautious. You start to thank it for getting you through situations where vulnerability might have been dangerous. But now, you let it know that you don't need that kind of protection anymore, that you can care for yourself without self-attack, that you are building a new way, one rooted in presence, not punishment. Thanking the inner critic doesn't mean it disappears, but it changes the relationship. The volume lowers, the words soften, the urgency fades, and in its place, a new voice begins to grow. One that speaks like a guide, not a guard. One that asks questions instead of delivering verdicts. One that encourages effort without threatening your worth. That voice is not manufactured. It was always there. It was just buried under years of inner tension. This work takes patience. The critic will test you. especially when you fail, when you're tired, when you're exposed. But each time you meet it with compassion, you weaken the belief that harshness equals strength. You begin to embody a different kind of resilience, one that says, I can be honest with myself without cruelty. I can strive without self-hate. I can grow without fear. Buddhist practice reminds us that every part of the self deserves attention, even the parts that seem unlovable, especially those, because what you ignore gains power. What you welcome begins to transform. The inner critic is no exception. When you bow to its original intent, to protect, you reclaim your voice. You begin to speak to yourself with the kind of care you offer others, and that care becomes a habit. Gratitude in this space isn't loud. It doesn't look like affirmations or mantras. It's quieter. It's the way you pause before blaming yourself. It's the way you notice your own effort before fixating on flaws. It's the breath you take after falling short that says, even this is human. Even now, I'm allowed to begin again. You also begin to recognize how the critic affects your relationships, how its voice shapes your view of others, how judgment toward yourself often becomes judgment toward the world. And when that link is seen, gratitude deepens, not just for the healing happening inside, but for the way it's allowing you to connect more gently with others. This shift allows more peace to enter your life. You stop expecting perfection. You stop trying to outrun your flaws. You begin to see that being enough was never about being flawless. It was about being real, being awake, being present with the whole of who you are, not just the polished parts. And in that presence, you start to feel something new, trust. Trust in your ability to face discomfort without self-punishment. Trust in your strength to grow without shame. Trust in the voice that says, you are learning, and that is enough. That trust is the root of lasting gratitude, because it no longer depends on outcomes. It depends on your willingness to stay with yourself, no matter what. So, as the night quiets and the thoughts begin to slow, notice if the critic tries to speak again. You don't have to fight it. Just listen. Thank it gently. And then, with equal honesty, tell it the truth. I hear you. I know you tried to protect me, but I don't need fear to grow anymore. I'm safe now, I'm healing now, and I choose to move forward with love. That is not weakness. That is not self-indulgence. That is transformation. That is freedom. And that is something to be deeply grateful for. After softening toward the voice within, after meeting your inner critic, not with resistance, but with recognition, something fundamental begins to settle. A kind of inner quiet. Not silence, but calm. Not perfection, but peace with what is. And from that peace, something beautiful rises. An energy that no longer revolves around proving worth or earning love. It begins to turn outward. It begins to offer itself. And that offering, when given without needing anything in return, becomes one of the deepest forms of gratitude in Buddhist practice. The gratitude of service without reward. This kind of giving is rare. In a world that constantly measures value, that keeps invisible scorecards, that rewards recognition more than sincerity, serving without expectation can feel radical. But Buddhism teaches that this is where real freedom begins, when the need for praise dissolves, When the hunger for return fades, what remains is something purer than transaction. A kind of joy that isn't dependent on what comes back, but on what flows out. The Buddha often spoke of generosity as one of the most immediate paths to happiness, not because it fills the giver with pride, but because it empties the heart of clinging. When you give without needing acknowledgement, you unhook yourself from the mind that constantly asks, "What's in it for me?" And when that question disappears, so does a great deal of suffering. Gratitude in service is not about being thanked. It's about recognizing the opportunity to give at all. It sees the act of offering help, time, presence, or care not as a duty, but as a privilege. It understands that to give means you have something to give, that your body, your mind, your resources, your energy, they're capable of being used to lift someone else's moment, even just a little, and that, in itself, is a miracle. Serving without reward doesn't mean you're invisible. It means you're free. You're not caught in the trap of needing applause. You're not dependent on outcome. You're not performing. You're just offering, because the offering itself is enough. In Buddhist monasteries, daily chores are done in silence and without praise. Cleaning the floor, preparing the food, sweeping the temple. Each task is approached with the same attention as meditation. No one gets awards for it, no one posts about it, but each act becomes a way of bowing to the present, a way of saying, "This small thing matters." And from that smallness, a powerful sense of gratitude arises. Because when you serve like this, you're not waiting. You're not giving with strings attached. You stop calculating whether someone deserves your effort. You stop keeping mental receipts. You simply serve. And when that service is complete, you rest. Not with resentment, but with fulfillment. The kind of fulfillment that only comes from knowing you did something real. This isn't about becoming a martyr. It's not about overgiving or losing yourself. Buddhist wisdom is clear. Giving must be sustainable. It must come from fullness, not from depletion. But once you care for yourself enough to give from a stable place, that giving becomes joyful. It becomes light. It becomes something you want to do. Not because you're trying to prove anything, but because it feels good to give without chains. When the mind lets go of "I gave, so I should get," it begins to open in a new way. It starts to see how interconnected everything is, how the water you pour for someone else quenches your own thirst in a different form, how every kind gesture plants something in the soil of your own heart, not to be harvested for applause, but simply because it makes the ground more fertile. Gratitude in this context becomes less of a moment and more of a movement. It's not just something you feel, it's something you live. You give thanks by giving time. You give thanks by making meals. You give thanks by listening, by showing up, by cleaning something that no one will notice but everyone will benefit from. That's the beauty of invisible service. It's everywhere, and it touches everything. This kind of practice also protects you, because when your giving is rooted in presence instead of outcome, you don't get burnt out as easily. You're not crushed when others don't notice. You're not bitter when there's no return. Your heart stays open because it's not giving to be filled. It's giving because it's already full, and that fullness becomes self-sustaining. You begin to notice how the act of serving, without needing anything back, actually nourishes you. It clears the mind. It softens the ego. It brings you closer to what matters. Not status, not praise, but real connection. Sometimes the deepest acts of service are the quietest ones. Holding space for a friend's grief, picking up trash on a street no one cares about, sending kindness in thought to someone you may never meet. No ceremony, no spotlight, just intention, just love expressed through action. And in those moments, your presence becomes a prayer, not for yourself, but for the world. And that prayer is a form of gratitude so pure that it doesn't even name itself. This is also how Buddhist monks dedicate their practice, not just for their own awakening, but for the benefit of all beings. Every chant, every breath, every silent hour of sitting becomes a gift offered outward. And even though no one may see it, that offering has power. Because service done with love, even in the smallest moments, changes the energy of the world. It also changes your relationship with yourself. You stop measuring your worth by how much recognition you get. You begin to feel steady in your own sense of value. You learn to trust your quiet acts. You learn that sincerity is enough, and that trust builds something strong, a kind of dignity that doesn't need to be seen to feel real. Gratitude deepens when giving becomes natural, when it's no longer forced or calculated, when it rises spontaneously because your heart has learned that the joy of giving is not in what returns, it's in the giving itself. So, tonight, as you let your breath slow and your body soften, reflect gently. Think of the quiet ways you've served, the unnoticed things you've done, the kindnesses no one clapped for. Let yourself feel the worth of those moments, not because they were praised, but because they were honest. Let yourself rest in the truth that giving without reward is not loss, it is liberation. And in that liberation, you'll find a gratitude that no one can take away. When the need for praise falls away and service becomes its own reward, gratitude stops being something you chase. It starts being something you live. It moves through your hands, your choices, your quiet acts of care. But even with that depth of giving, modern life has a way of sweeping you back into its current. Days blur, moments rush, meaning slips, and slowly, even the heart's sincerest gratitude can become something abstract again, something you feel but no longer express. This is where the old ways can save you. This is where ritual returns. Not as something religious or rigid, but as a way of remembering, a way of anchoring your thankfulness to something steady, tangible, alive. In Buddhist practice, rituals were never about superstition. They were never about pleasing a higher being or checking a spiritual box. They were reminders, grounding points. They brought the sacred into the ordinary, over and over again. Lighting incense wasn't about scent. It was about pausing before speaking. Offering food to the altar wasn't about worship. It was about remembering the hands that made the meal possible. Bowing wasn't about hierarchy. It was about softening pride. These were not performances, they were doorways. And through those doorways, gratitude flowed like breath. Today, ritual is often lost, or it's reserved for holidays and special occasions. But gratitude doesn't thrive in once-a-year reflections. It needs rhythm. It needs something that repeats, not because you forget, but because life pulls you in 1,000 directions. Ritual doesn't ask for hours, it asks for intention. It turns simple acts into sacred space. Drinking tea can become a ritual, not when rushed, but when done with presence. Holding the cup, feeling the warmth, noticing the steam, pausing before sipping, saying thank you, whether silently or aloud, for the water, the leaves, the hands that harvested them, the time that brought them here. That is not trivial. That is thankfulness made visible. Lighting a candle at the end of the day can be a ritual, a way of saying, the day is done, I'm still here, that is enough. No matter what was left unfinished, no matter how messy things felt, that small light becomes a symbol of recognition, a symbol that says, I honor this moment. And in that honoring, peace returns. In Buddhism, even walking becomes ritual. Slow steps, mindful breath, each movement not just a way to get somewhere, but a practice of being where you are. You step not to escape, but to arrive. And in that arrival, you remember. You remember your body, you remember the earth, you remember that movement itself is a gift. And that remembering is a form of gratitude. Meals can become rituals, not feasts, not performances, just daily acts of attention. Sitting down, eating without screens, offering one breath of thanks before the first bite, noticing the flavors, chewing slowly, allowing silence. These are not just healthy habits. They are rituals that bring the sacred back into something so easily forgotten. Food is never just food. It is life being given, and eating with awareness becomes a way of saying, I see that, I'm grateful for that, I won't rush through that. Waking up can become a ritual, before checking your phone, before thinking of all you have to do. One breath, one stretch, one thought of thanks. I get to begin again. That single moment changes your direction. It shifts your attention from lack to possibility, from hurry to humility. And from there, your day starts on different ground. Gratitude rituals don't have to look spiritual. They don't need chanting or mantras. Even making your bed can be one. Folding the sheets with care, smoothing the pillow. Not because it has to be perfect, but because it's a way of saying, this space matters, my rest matters, this life I'm living matters. Gratitude rituals also help anchor you when things feel chaotic, when the world feels overwhelming, when emotions run high. You don't need to fix everything. You just need something to return to, something steady, lighting a candle, taking 10 slow breaths, writing 3 things you're thankful for, bowing your head for a moment before eating. These small acts become sacred containers. They don't remove the chaos, but they remind you who you are in the middle of it. In monastic life, rituals are woven into every part of the day, not to control, but to connect. The bell rings. You bow, you walk, you eat, you sit. Each activity holds presence. Each gesture carries intention. And that consistency becomes a refuge, a way of living where nothing is wasted, where even washing dishes becomes a meditation on gratitude for water, warmth, nourishment, and time. In the modern world, that same spirit can be reclaimed, not by copying the form, but by living the function. Creating your own rituals, morning ones, evening ones, ones for transition, ones for forgiveness, ones for slowing down, ones for waking up, not because life demands it, but because your spirit needs it, needs something to hold on to, something to return to, something that says again and again, "You are here, and this is enough." Gratitude rituals are also ways of repairing. When your mind has been caught in loops of negativity, when your heart has been guarded for too long, when your attention has been scattered, ritual becomes the quiet hand that gathers it all back, gathers you back, with a breath, with a pause, with a single candle, a single cup, a single gesture that brings you home. And over time, these small rituals begin to change your relationship with life. You stop rushing through it. You stop missing it. You begin to feel the weight of every ordinary moment, not as a burden, but as a blessing. You begin to feel the pulse of the present, the way it keeps offering itself to you over and over, and your rituals become the way you say thank you for that offering. In Buddhism, the path is not about grand transformation. It's about remembering what's already true. Ritual helps you remember, helps you return, helps you say, this life, this quiet, imperfect, miraculous life, is worth honoring. Not just when things go well, not just when you're inspired, but especially in the middle of the ordinary, the boring, the chaotic, the small. That's where ritual lives, in the margins, in the in-between.